Where is fire? Okay, let me play the national anthem. I think we have about a minute or so for that.
So my audio is good now.
Yes, we can hear you now, sir.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. I'm just going to quickly national anthem. Can you guys hear the okay. Can you hear the sound? No. Huh. Let's hear the sound.
No volume.
No volume on that one. Maybe we may skip that today. Because we'll be starting in 1 minute, so we'll probably skip that and play it at the end.
Okay.
Amen. Praise the name of the Lord. Let me welcome all of us to today's edition of the African Leadership Group, the Nigerian Leadership Series. And today is indeed a very, very interesting day for me because we have as our speaker today somebody I have known for most of my life, a very, very close, not just a friend, but a brother who we drank the same water together in the sleepy town of Ibadan. And we're going to be talking about matters that are very close to our heart, matters that we're really, really concerned about. So let me thank him for even agreeing to speak at relatively short notice and readjusting his schedule to accommodate us. Our guest this evening is a strategic thinker, conflict resolution and counter-terrorism consultant, and a strong advocate for good behavior and righteousness, otherwise known as the Omoluabi ethos in Yoruba parlance. He's an architect, MSc honors, but for a long time he has doing the work of his savior and his creator, the Almighty God. Is an opinion molder in both state and international affairs, regular contributions on TV, print media. He serves on the board of several accredited NGOs, including the Gapsawa Women's Initiative and the Macedonian Initiative and the Omoluabi Network. He's an author of several bestseller books and is also a multidisciplinary research He's also done his multidisciplinary research audio book, The Devil's Arithmetic. He's a bridge builder with deep investments in northern Nigeria in terms of building bridges. I'm not sure they are financial or physical assets. And he has served as a voice to the voiceless in many parts of the country. He is the senior pastor, Rivers of Living Waters Church, or if you like, group of churches. And I think his biggest claim to fame is that we attended the same primary school together. That's his biggest claim to fame. And he has an extremely beautiful senior sister. That's the second biggest claim to fame. Please welcome with me my friend and my brother, Reverend Oladimeji Peter Gureje Thompson. My dear brother, welcome and thank you so much. You're looking very calm, very handsome, very fresh, very fresh. I think God has been especially wonderful to you. Thank you for agreeing to speak to us today, my brother. And I know that it's not been easy out there, but God has been faithful to all of us. Say me very well to your wife and, of course, the brothers and sisters we both share. We're speaking today on insecurity, the value of the Nigerian life. Let me first of all ask you, trained as an architect, called by God and pastoring for many, many years, how did you find yourself in the corridors and shadow of insecurity, talking on international affairs, your work that you've done in the North, your Macedonian initiative, and how have you become such a voice in our present day Nigeria? How did that happen? Because my knowledge of most architects is that they either build houses or want to make money. If they then find themselves in pastoral work, most pastors just want to face their pastoral work and build their congregation and just do their best within that circuit and not want to step either out of line or anything. But here you find yourself now looking at insecurity in Nigeria, looking at conflicts resolution in Nigeria. In fact, the one that frightens me is counter-terrorism and so on and so forth. How did you find yourself in all this, if I may ask?
Thank you very much, Pastor Itwa. It's a pleasure to be here with you. And like you did say, we go back many, many, many decades, as far as we can remember, we were conscious. Now, that's a very interesting question because I don't think the answer will be any different from how you found yourself on the pulpit. Because you know that when we were all growing up, it was all about being professionals. It was all about, I mean, we had the tracks laid for us, as it were, almost by our parents, as it were, you know. And none of us, neither you nor I, as far back as I remember, ever thought about occupying a pulpit. But here we are because, let me put it like this. When we discovered that we were created before we were born, we discovered that ever before the natural birth, God had known us, like he said to Jeremiah. And not only that, he had laid a course for us, good works that he had before prepared for us to do. So from the moment you and I believe, discover that this life is a journey of discovery. Once I contacted the gospel of the kingdom, I took out time to locate the tracks of life that I was created to occupy, only to find out, looking back, that so many things in life, ever before I came to Christ, had prepared me for what I was meant to be doing. So I guess for me, it started in like 1999. I was doing a series on love, and then I just heard news that some Christians were killed someplace, and I was praying about it, feeling very sad. And you know, the body of Christ is a body. If you touch the head, the foot hurts. So I sent one of our pastors to the hot spots then in Kaduna. The report he brought back was so gruesome that I said, look, I'm going to go there myself. And looking back, I realized that I was able to go to Kaduna then in the midst of all the fire, because for me, northern Nigeria was not some far away land. Northerners to me are people. I mean, I've been to Kaduna, like from 1979, I've been going to Kaduna in and out. I went to Ahmadu Bello University, which again, when I look back, how I ended up there, it was all divine providence. So when the trouble started and the Lord showed me what was to come from like 1999, and you know that you're instructed and you simply follow up. And that's why I'm as bewildered as you are. I thought I was a very good architect,
Okay, thank you very much. So what really is going on in Nigeria? What is the state of security, or if you like, insecurity? What are the challenges that we're having? And what did you discover from all the initiatives and the incursions that you have made? Where are we really on this journey?
Well, let me put it like this for us. Let's capture Nigeria quickly and realize that it's not just Nigeria, it's symptomatic of practically all African nations. The truth is that Nigeria, like most African countries, was designed as a colonial construct. And when you're designed as a colonial construct, there are certain things that are programmed into you. So whether it's India or Nigeria or Uganda or even Canada, if you ask me, any nation that's been through the process of slavery and colonization, which was just a slight improvement, as it were, on slavery, is founded on a program. Now, the interesting thing about programs is that programs outlive the programmers. So essentially, the foundation of Nigeria was laid by people like Lord Fitzroy, names, Lord Harcourt, names that the average Nigerian would not even know today. But if you go into the archives, it's all there. And of course, everybody knows the name of Lugard, but the real person who designed Nigeria was a fellow called Tubman Goldie. He was a swashbuckling imperialist. And he designed Nigeria on the same principles as the East Indian. He was a student of the Roman Empire. So what he put together was a colonial construct. And when we got independence, what we thought was independence, what they had put into place was a machinery to keep us failing without falling. So the Nigerian history has been predictable. Now, the difference would have been there. If you listen to what Obafemi Awolowo said, for instance, was that in 1962, in 58, after the Constitutional Conference in London, he did establish certain parameters when he discovered the chicanery of the British. He was a believer a lot in British law until Lord Chandos did him one. So Awolowo did mention that we inherited a contraption completely. And in that contraption, there were centrifugal forces. And he mentioned three things that had to be done if we wanted to succeed as a state and a nation. We never did them. So what has happened to Nigeria is that as the years went by, today we are now facing 5 existential threats. Each one on their own is bad enough. But the major one is the global resurgence of religious terrorism, which is documented globally. That's what I began to observe. And when I saw the patterns, when God began to show me, I say, hey, there's a method to the madness. Everybody's talking about farmer, harder clash and stuff like that. But I didn't believe that because I went in, I saw gruesome stuff. That's too gruesome to describe on a panel like this, but really bad stuff. And then I saw that there was a pattern to it. There was an intelligence behind it. And I began to investigate that. That took me to America, made friends with a lady called Faith McDonald. She introduced me to Baroness Cox in England, who then was the deputy speaker of the House of Lords. And her special advisors, British advisors, Christians, they began to sit down and try to educate me. Then I met a good friend of mine who used to be a former radical, Islamist radical globally, who had become a Christian. So he simply broke it down for me. And then I looked at Nigeria and I realized that, my God, this fifth threat is the most potent of all because it's very patient, it's extremely intelligent, and it has dribbled Nigeria for years, and it continues to have the upper hand. Unfortunately, the security of architecture in Nigeria still has no credible response to what we call the Hydra. So let me just say to you that Nigeria is facing a big threat in that this thing is patient. If you go and read the 9/11 reports in America after the 9/11 event, and I must tell you something that prior to 9/11, a few weeks, I was in America having meetings with some church leaders, evangelicals actually, warning them that we had a global problem. And at that time, America was asleep. So they scoffed and said, look, are you here to ask for aid? I said, no. So I picked my phone and I called Dr. Umbang, who was then the CAN president. So when they spoke to Dr. Umbang, the tonality of the meeting changed, you know. So they got serious, but they didn't believe it was possible. 9/11 happened 2 weeks after. Then my own phone began to blow up in America. They wanted to know, how did you know this was going to happen? What are the symptoms? How do you read this thing and all that? Now, because we're in church and we have served in church leadership for years, we got an early start on this problem. We studied it before everybody else. You see, it's a new war form altogether. A lot of people mistake it for some old narratives. That's not what it is. It was perfected by a young man that everybody knows all over the world, Osama bin Laden, and Zawahiri, his right-hand man, in Sudan, next door to Nigeria. Very intelligent, very articulate. It's like a globalized enterprise. Nigeria is a high priority, and it's a hydra. It's multi-headed. It's extremely intelligent. It's very patient. It has no rules of engagement whatsoever. So the truth, if you ask me, is this, is that the architecture of thought that is required to handle this thing is yet to show up on the screen in Nigeria.
Thank you very much. Thank you for those very lucid comments. I'm going to take you back a little bit because this has been a request. Although I thought to myself I will ask you anyway, but somebody has made a specific request on the platform that you said Awolowo said 3 things that Nigeria needed to do to counter the contraption that we had found ourselves in. Do you remember what those 3 things are?
Yes, I wish if I had my notes with me, because I prefer to make sure that it's very exact. You know, Obafemi Awolowo was a man of exactitudes. First of all, nothing that is happening right now was not predicted by Obafemi Awolowo. When he came back in 1958, he said he had this foreboding that something terrible was ahead for Nigeria. And at that time, he said he felt he couldn't do anything about it. But later on, he rallied and said, look, let's do something about it. And he tried his best to prepare us, to move us away from the paths of failure to the paths of success as a nation. But the 3 things he said after mentioning the fact that the British handed over to us a contraption that had its own centrifugal forces within it. He said it's up to the Nigerian leadership at that time. What he said, let me just summarize the 3 things he mentioned, was that we needed to revisit the accord, as it were. We needed to rewrite our narrative. We needed to give value to the life of the average citizen, as it were, and then make the entire nation forward-looking, prosperous, and, you know, make it a nation that would be at the forefront, as it were, of humanity, just like what he had been able to do with the Western region in the 10 golden years. You and I grew up in what you call the sleepy town of Ibadan. Frankly speaking, in those days was like Dubai. If you remember very well, when Awolowo was there, WNTV, WNBS, we watched television ahead of Germany and France. If you remember very well, the road network was something else. In fact, it was way ahead in all things. The first skyscraper, as it were, in sub-Saharan Africa. The educational system was tops. And that was the product of a thinker who tried, who knew what had been done to Nigeria by Lord Chandos and his cohorts, and tried his best to see whether he would be able to, like, as a matter of fact, he made such plans for Northern Nigeria. It was interesting. He pointed out that there was a gap in education between Northern Nigeria and Southern Nigeria. In 1905, I think the gap was about 40 years. By 1980, when he was launching a book by Professor C.O. Taiwo on education, past, present, and future in Nigeria, he mentioned that the gap had increased, I think, to about 90 years. And he said, if by 1990, nothing had been done, the gap would increase to 100 years. And he did mention that the moment that gap would reach that tipping point, a whole lot of gruesome things will start to happen and Nigeria will be taken apart. So this, in a nutshell, is what Obafemi Awolowo tried his best to avert unsuccessfully.
Yeah, I don't know how much you know of the politics of that day, but some things happened that made it impossible for him to become prime minister, which I think some of those things were pre-orchestrated, and also for his attempt at reaching an accord with Azikiwe not to work, and therefore we got the Nigeria that we find ourselves in. Okay, so maybe I'm jumping the gun. Why do you think the British, or why do you think we Nigerians also somehow conspired or collaborated to bring Nigeria to where it is now, where we're having this level of insecurity and the economy seems not to be moving? Well, you said the narrative or the history of Nigeria was rewritten. What did the British put in place, or what did we ourselves put in place to make sure that we're living this present narrative?
Let me put it like this. Nigeria, if at all, has any blame in all this, maybe like a 15% of it.
15%?
Yes. And I'll tell you why. I've said that's why I keep saying to you that for every day we wake up and sleep in Nigeria, we need to realize there are something called eternal truths and there are programmers. Let me put it like this. The Roman Empire, if you remember very well, they were masters at subjugating people and conquering territories. When the Roman Empire broke up into the new Roman Empire and all that, remember that it later splintered into little groups like Germanium, Hispania, and all the little countries that we know as European countries till today. Now, if there was something that was passed down from the Roman civilization to all those countries, it was this desire to dominate others. Don't forget that the Greeks had done a lot of study on humanity, on politics and all that, and the Greeks had their own ideas or charismata. If you remember, even the word democracy, democratia, all this came out of Greek thought. Now, these are things that the Romans sort of inherited, and it came down the bloodline into most of the European nations. And so, if you look at it very well, most of them are they were all very territorial. They were very predatory, as it were. This is something they inherited all through. So when it came to the era when they began, like 1884, 1885, instead of fighting themselves, they carved Africa up into little bits. Now, these are masters of the game. These are people who went to India, and I can't remember how many trillion, or $143 trillion that they made in India, but ended up killing about 60-something million people to make that money. Now, the point is, they had studied how to create, how to program people for so long that they will do what they call the divide and rule. Now, let's look at the instance of Nigeria, for instance. I said to you, it was a man called Tubman Goldie who actually designed Nigeria. He was a student of Roman Empire. He, when he was about to die, burnt all his papers on Nigeria, on how he designed Nigeria. Not only that, this is interesting, he called his children and placed a curse on them. If any one of them, if he left a scrap of paper behind on how he designed Nigeria, And if anyone were to dare to publish it, he put a curse on them. He was the one who employed Lugard, the Megad. I mean, with all the pretensions of Lugard, Lugard was not a brilliant man. Lugard was employed by Chamberlain when they bought the territories of what is mostly Nigeria today from Tubman Goldie's company in the year 1900 for about £865,000. So we actually started as a business deal. So when you talk about the divide and rule, there are certain things that you can put together, and that when you put a nation together, they would think they can succeed. But you who engineered them, you know, it's like a Rubik's Cube. If you remember the Rubik's Cube we used to toy around with in those days, yeah. Now, the Rubik's Cube is a mathematical puzzle. So if you meet a people whose architecture of thought doesn't understand the power of mathematizing inquiry, if you meet a people like that, you can actually prepare a future for them. They'll run around in circles for years. I was in Rwanda, for instance, 1894, when von Gotzen, the German, arrived in Rwanda. There were no tribes in Rwanda. They spoke only one language, Urundi Rwanda. When he got there with a program, this program I'm talking about. This program, which is one of the things that I feel that African studies should have done and helped a lot of African nations to get away from its fractures. He arrived with this program, and he was the one who actually introduced this Hutu-Tutsi thing. And if you do your studies deeply enough, you'd realize that there was interchanges in between. After the World War was lost and Belgium, I think, took over, they continued that script. I took out time and I sent people to the archives in London, the colonial documents that have been released, and found out that, listen, they have a program. Once they enter a territory with that program, all you need is a handful of Britons with that program. Northern Nigeria had 7 million people. The British brought in maybe about 300 and something people and the program and ruled over Northern Nigeria. See? So that program is a very interesting program. It involves what they call the divide and rule. You see? Now, there are many things to that program. It's a very sophisticated program. It's an enslavement program, actually, because it works on you. For instance, by the time the British left Nigeria, they knew what would obtain in Nigeria for the years after. I'll give you an example of one thing that people don't think about, just one out of many. And I know this because I decided to do a multidisciplinary study of nations like ours when I saw the failure and I saw what was happening to us. And I found out that the depth of thought that these people put into place for us, the way we quarrel, the way we bicker, the North-South divide, the religious divides, were more predictable than we imagine. Right? Now, let me give you an example. If you look up until this particular dispensation, we will not notice that ever since Nigeria became a nation, quote, it has been put into place in a way such that the number one normally is never as intelligent as the number two. It's a fracture of leadership selection. It started with the West African Frontier Force, started by Lugard in 1898 or so, a few years to the turn of the millennium. And this is what they did, was that they brought in the army, the West African Frontier Force, trained young soldiers, men like brass, they like things like that. They brought them in. In due season, they took them to Sanders and Aldershot for officer training, profiling them. When Nigeria insisted on getting the so-called, quote, independence, they didn't argue. These guys were already in place. The moment, predictably, abused people will abuse others. The politicians didn't do too well. Quick, we saw the rash of coups. The so-called coup is something interesting. It was a seizing of the leadership. On a good day, nobody wants a soldier to run a country. He doesn't know much. He was not trained for the economy. What does he know about diplomacy? What does the soldier know about the nitty-gritty, the socio-economics of running a nation? But you see, by putting a square peg in a round hole, they effectively stunted the growth of Nigeria for at least 5 decades. If you look all over Africa, Francophone, Anglophone, you will find out that this program obtained practically all over. And by the time you even gain independence, you're talking about democracy, not even really understanding what the democracy and its intricacies, what makes it work. You already have established a class of rulers who on a normal day would never be a ruler. Now, let me be very rude openly here, because this has affected the lives of too many. I was talking to one of my elders one day. I'm sure you know, he was in Casey, you know him, Asiedu, Philip Asiedu, the elder. And I was asking him one day that Gawan is such a nice person. Yakubu Gawan, such a nice fellow. You know, so, I mean, you meet him, you love him. Very affable person and all that. But when I began to mathematize, I asked him, how does a man like you who studied, I think he went to Oxford, I think. You studied economics or whatever in Oxford. How do you come back into a nation and serve under a man who is an excellent soldier? No matter how much of a gentleman he is, excuse me, you cannot tell me that you don't realize that he wasn't really, I mean, his profession was not the kind of profession that should rule a nation. In his quieter moments, he's going to dislike me for saying this openly. But I remember asking Dr. Christopher Collade the same question, because I know how loyal he is to Olusegun Obasanjo. And I asked myself, if it was the other way around and an Asiodu had ruled Nigeria with a Gawan answering to him, or if it was a Christopher Collade that had ruled Nigeria with an Obasanjo answering to him, wouldn't things be different? And how come all of a sudden these people speak like pundits? I, for instance, I listen to them, hola, and I'm wondering at times why they're on headlines in Nigeria all over, because I'm asking myself, with all the years of the brutalization of the psyche of Nigeria by the military, with what they have done on the inside and the brains of the Nigerian citizens, why is anybody listening to these people? We may not like what I'm about to say, but the last election is the only election where a Nigerian cracked the code. He cracked the code of that leadership fracture. Somehow, the North-South thing that had been put together and all the devices that had been ruling us since the colonials left was cracked in the last elections. But my fear was this. I was asking myself, did he crack that thing deliberately? Or it was while in the pursuit of his own ambition that he had discovered the key that unlocks loyalties and used it to ascend into the presidency? My challenge was this. If he did that and did not replace, he has cracked something. The real lines that the British lead have ended. If we continue like this, it is clear that there's going to be a crash ahead. If we mathematize inquiry and we respect the fact that the mathematization of inquiry has been more accurate than the prophecies of all you Nigerian pastors, okay? I'm inclusive too. You'd agree with me that we have this cause for alarm, for us to get thinkers who can actually look ahead and redraw, rejig the system, not just a matter of what's that called? They keep calling for the federal, what you call it. If Obafemi Awolowo was alive till today, he would have upgraded his intelligence. And I can give you a good idea if we use AI tools to predict what Awolowo would have been asking Nigeria to do. And I can tell you for sure that will be totally different from what we're doing right now.
Very, very interesting, very lucid, and very incisive. Okay, so the British came, they had this code, they programmed us in a certain direction. What was their motive or motivation to achieve what behind it? And now we seem to think that, all right, maybe the military also were programmed to interfere in the political landscape of Nigeria and change whatever basis on which we even thought we had come together as a nation. Because like you rightly said, there was just this rush of coups all over Africa. Ghana had it, Sierra Leone had it, Liberia had its own experience, Kenya, Uganda. There was just this rush. there was just this rush of coups, like somebody gave a signal and the whole thing just started like that, and the delicate so-called democracy on which political structure on which we had gotten our independence, everything crashed and was wiped out. And that basis, I was discussing with a lady friend of mine in London just a couple of days ago. I think I was explaining this to her for the first time because she comes from a slightly different generation, and they didn't quite see all these things. And even our general Yakubu, the one that we spoke about, that you mentioned just now, he himself admitted somehow, now he's 91 or 92, that he wasn't actually trained for governance or leadership in Nigeria. He said it. He said that even the day he was negotiating with Ojukwu in Aburi, he had a fever. And by the time he finished negotiating with Ojukwu and came back to Nigeria, what they told him, the civil servants, the Asiodus and the people like that he now came back to, or the other group said that, no, this kind of negotiation is not the kind of thing that will stand. And that's what led to the civil war, because he now had to break whatever he had agreed with Ojukwu. Because Ojukwu was very smart, like you said, Oxford trained. He quickly went on air and said that this is what we've agreed on Aburi, and on Aburi we stand, blah, 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 knowing that maybe he had gained the upper edge in that negotiation. The one comes back to Nigeria and people shake their heads and say, no, that's not going to work, this and that. So it was a source of embarrassment for him to have to come back and retract on that agreement. And then the civil war itself broke out, And it seems as though what you're saying is that a lot of these things were coded, mathematical, arranged, put into place. It's amazing. So this is where we found ourselves, my brother. What can you and myself and innocent people listening to this program, what can we do to get us out of this situation, if possible? That's number one, And I'm told that Pastor Tony Rapu and Pastor Yomi Kasali are on this program. So if they want to chip in at some stage or the other, that might be interesting. So what can we do, you and I, as individuals, as Nigerians? Because first of all, not a lot of Nigerians, including our political leaders, our economic leaders, our so-called corporate leaders, understand this thing that you have described. So we are, the Bible says we are fighting as one that beats the air. We're fighting the wrong enemy. A lot of the time, we're fighting amongst ourselves. It's the North, it's the South. But what we're actually fighting is a systemized foundation of commotion and confusion. And that fight that we are fighting is symptomatic and a result of that foundation. If the foundation be destroyed, what can even the righteous do? So, having said that, I don't want to put words in your mouth. What can we as ordinary people do at this point in time? And then number two, going to what we wanted to discuss, the state of our security in Nigeria, how it is affecting our economics, governance, and politics, and what we can do about it. Those two questions. And then I'm going to ask Sonia and Jumoke to butt in and then take the question and answer session for this period. My brother Ladi, I hand it back to you.
Thank you very much, Idra. Well, let's put it like this. First of all, we don't need to beat ourselves on the head because we have been sort of victims here. I'll tell you why. Globally, till today, unofficially, Africans are captured as being emotive, intuitive, unscientific, and incapable of critical thought, unfortunately. And unfortunately, statistics bears that out, if we'd like to admit that to ourselves. So what exactly can we do that will make the difference? First of all, we need to understand that there's an architecture of thought that masters what we call programming. Practically every nation in the world that's successful is a program. Even the successful ones are programs too, but they don't know it. So we need to understand that what Nigeria needs right now is not restructure. we need to reprogram. And when we want to reprogram a nation, there are certain parameters that you have to understand before you begin to put the program together. I'll mention only one of them so that we can, move forward with it. Right now, look at what they call corruption in Nigeria, the so-called endemic corruption in Nigeria, and the way the media globally paints us as if it was not predictable. Now, if anybody looks at the equation called Nigeria, it will be better for us to realize it's a simultaneous equation. There are challenges within, but we are also part of a global construct that presents us a challenge as well, an uneven balance. The Marshall Plan, you remember the Marshall Plan, you remember the Brentwood and all that. So even the economy you're talking about, a whole lot of people who went to economic schools and all that need to go back and read a book written in 1933, The Miseducation of the Negro, by Woodson, Carter G. Woodson. He was the second African American to go to get a PhD in Harvard. Now they'd realize that whoever controls your thinking doesn't have to worry about what you do. So the point is this: we need to reprogram Nigeria. There is nothing wrong with Nigeria. You and I know. You went to KC, you have a lot of friends from Northern Nigeria. I have a lot of friends. I went to Northern Nigeria to college. So we realize that the average Northerner is not a fool. They're people too. They are bright. They are not savages. You and I know many Fulani people, but we know how they are, that these are normal friends of ours. They're no different, as it were, from where. But there's a narrative which is part of a program today. And that narrative is so destructive because we don't realize how powerful narratives are within programs. So let me first take the element of a narrative. Look, in the Garden of Eden, everything was hunky-dory. Things were going well. When the dragon was going to attack the Garden of Eden, he did not go in with a revolver or pistols. What he sent in there was a narrative. Once he sent in a narrative, which was actually a counter-narrative to the one that God had established for Adam and Eve. He sent in a narrative, and the moment Eve picked that narrative, he was strategic. The moment Eve picked that narrative and handed it over to Adam, narratives are more powerful than guns. But you see, people don't realize how powerful narratives are. So we overlook the fact that the people who write narratives, nobody teaches this in any college, anywhere in the world. I've checked curricula all over the world. Nobody teaches such things. So once they write your narrative for you and you accept it, the program will churn out what that narrative is dictating. So I just said that because in the Garden of Eden, when the narrative came in, look at the results today of just a narrative. That's why the Bible says, I fear lest as the serpent beguiled Eve, so that it will not be the simplicity. And minister, so you understand what I'm saying. As the serpent beguiled Eve, we don't want anybody to corrupt us from the simplicity that is in Christ. Now, let's bring that into the practical world. When you write a program, a narrative is part of a program. Okay, it's a very core part of a program. Once you get the wrong narrative, you're through. In Nigeria, the narrative is all wrong. Now, there are about 7 elements in programming when you want to program a nation. So right now, the best thing we can do is to have peacemakers like you. You're good at mixing. You're good at, one of the, you spoke about Obafemi Awolowo. Obafemi Awolowo was a good leader, but he had, in the leadership model of Oduduwa, if you studied Oduduwa in ancient Ile-Ife, he had about 7 assets. Obafemi Awolowo had 5. Of the 2 that Awolowo did not have, one of them was his interpersonal skills, as it were, diplomacy, the ability to, to persuade, not with facts and figures, realizing, as who was that philosopher, David, what's his name, said that people argue away from conclusions. They don't argue towards conclusions. People are moved more emotionally than by facts and figures. So we need to find a set of peacemakers, first of all, who realize that Nigeria has been programmed wrongly, especially peacemakers who have one foot in northern Nigeria and one foot in southern Nigeria, because till today, the global community treats us like 2 nations. We may not realize it. Now, this set of committee of friends or people who are statesmen and what have you, who have sound, deep understanding of programming, They need to persuade the people. And to even do that, let me tell you this. Nigeria has been put together in a way that if we try to have any conversation, it will erupt into violence shortly. It was programmed like that. So one of the first algorithms, this is what, I mean, you know what an algorithm is? The Rubik's Cube. Look, a Rubik's Cube, you can pass it for 7 generations in a family, and they will never solve it. Because the moment you distort the harmony of a Rubik's Cube, mathematically speaking right now, you will have more than 34 quintillion options. So nobody has ever solved the Rubik's Cube by luck before. So what you're going to have to do is that the Rubik's Cube, if you get the algorithms of the Rubik's Cube, a person of average intelligence will solve it in 6 minutes. So complexity engineering, a problem 7 generations could not solve. One person in 6-7 minutes can solve it if you have the algorithms. So what we need right now, I've done a study of all these algorithms for over about 20 to 30 something years. Okay. So what we need now is for us to implement the algorithms in Nigeria. Once we do that, you will watch things change by themselves. You will watch it. So it's not restructure anymore. It's too late for that. We need to reprogram the country. There's nothing wrong with the northerner. There's nothing wrong with the southerner. Even the so-called the terrible event of that civil war. You mentioned something here that even the civil war could have been averted. Aburi should have been the first meeting out of a string, but we were so programmed and so teleguided, we didn't realize it at that time. So the civil war need not have been formed. And even right now, going forward, there's something we need to do for the Igbo nation, part of the algorithms, to ensure that they have good example. Let's just use an example to show you what a program can do. 1776 in America, 13 colonies were worse off than Nigeria. Where Nigeria is today is where the 13 colonies were, and who was the colonial master then? It was Britain. Remember King George of Britain then. Okay, now there was so much troubles in the colonies in the so-called New World at that time until a handful of people got together, the so-called, quote, founding fathers of America. Now, the founding fathers of America established a program, and the major narrative that drives that program till day after tomorrow is this. It's very simple, and that's one of the things that's missing here. When the people have been devalued by enslavement, when the people have been devalued by colonialism, you need to write a reverse engineering program. So what the founding fathers of America did was that they wrote a reverse engineering program. And it started with something simple. We hold this truth to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. You say, what's the big deal about that? My God. What you don't know is this. You just brought the Almighty into the foundation of your nation in his office as creator. Now, that's the common LCM, the lowest common factor, LCM for all men all over the world, apart from, of course, those who are too brilliant to accept that God is creator. So when you level that all men are created equal, now watch this, Cicero had already done a lot of work and research on that. Cicero, who was an atheist, go and look and read Cicero's books and see the conclusions and tell me how they're different from what Jesus Christ had to say. So because all men are created equal, there's a spillover that comes from it. What America calls inalienable rights would never be enabled if you remove God in his office as creator from the foundation of America. So today, a lot of, later on in the American timeline, a lot of scholars who's too brilliant for themselves have introduced existentialism, relativism, and materialism, and try to attack that foundation. But what has upheld America is that Declaration of Independence. It's the most precious document outside of Scripture in the history of humanity. Now, if the same thing was installed in the foundation of Nigeria, that all men are created equal, and everybody from a child, look, I'll tell you what America does. A child starts learning subconsciously from the 3rd trimester of pregnancy till age 7 in a subconscious mode, on questioning. So when you want to establish an enculturation program, The Romans knew this. The Almighty knows this because he made us. You create a nation that you program your children as they are arriving from the 3rd trimester of pregnancy till age 7. What you put into them by that time, it'll be difficult for anybody to take it out of them. Trust me. Now, I don't want to go on and on about programming, but I think I have made it clear that what Nigeria really needs, those who are talking about, what's that thing again, restructure and all that, honestly, it's a wild goose chase. But the challenge with Nigeria is that everybody who knows a little bit, that's so difficult to persuade. Even when they're looking at lucid facts, figures, I trained as an architect, so we have critiques. So when we do things, we expect people to criticize it. And of course, you remember this, the Aristotelian syllogism, that is not the thesis or the antithesis, but the synthesis. That's where you find what you need to practicalize. So the challenge is that through the years, I had to move further afield because I found out that in Nigeria, everybody knows so much that even if we sit down and say, let's have a conversation, this thing is going to kill people. This is what's going to happen. Remember what happened to the Boko Haram? We're going to talk security next. That I started talking about this in 1999. A combination of sheer spiritual understanding, revelation, as well as pragmatism. But I can tell you, over the 20-something odd years, to get the people who are going to suffer the most, to open their eyes to see what's going on. You see, right now, I feel very sorry for the petit bourgeoisie in the Southwest, especially, who are sitting at ease, thinking that the little homes they built in a nation where there's no potable water and where electricity supply is not guaranteed to anybody, who think that things are sitting pretty. I feel for us, because what's ahead is not good. But if we would only mathematize the inquiry, because God himself is a mathematician, we could avoid all these things. So in a nutshell, let's reprogram Nigeria, and we need people like you. We need consensus builders. We need opinion molders who can sit together. And like I said, this thing is not offered in any university course. Look, I had to send contingents into the UK, the former colonial office. I'm talking about the archives. Go and let's study for ourselves. We don't want people to tell us. We don't want to read the British document on the construction of the empire. Let's get our own opinion. And by the time we're going to dig into all these things, I shook my head. These people are brilliant. That takes care of the first. Security architecture of Nigeria, let's not bother ourselves because it's a global thing with a local face. I can't hear you. You were saying something.
Pastor, you are muted.
No, I'm not, unless it's from your end.
Oh, Pastor Itwa is muted.
Oh, yes. Pastor Itwa, you're muted. You are muted. You have to unmute, Pastor Itwa.
Technology don't hold Pastor.
That was programming. I don't know where the programming is. Yeah, I was just going to chip in before you go into security and then hand over to Pastor Sonny. I don't know if you ever read, I came across something by a guy called Lord Macaulay that he wrote in the British Parliament in 1834. So was to the effect that the average African is so intelligent, so brilliant, so organized, so educated, so structured, that unless we can change their thinking to make them feel that everything African is inferior and everything European or British is superior, we will not be able to capture or take advantage of them. Was to that effect. Just to buttress what you just said, something that they even debated in their parliament and decided on, that this programming that they have programmed is something that they must put in place. And therefore, they rewrote our history as to Mungo Park and Clapperton. They rewrote our knowledge of culture, what is culturally good, what is culturally wrong. They demonized us, not letting us know that mighty Thor and Odin. Yeah, they've picked up that the mighty Thor and Odin and Diana and all those Spartacus were actually demons and idols that they themselves worshipped. They turned all those ones into comic features that we now bought for our children. They tried to do the same thing recently with this little boy that this woman that made a hell of a money with this thing that this they fashionalize their own idols, you know, and make us look like Ogun and Oya, terrible things. Meanwhile, the same mighty Thor that we read in comics, the same Odin, the same Spartacus, the same Diana, even Superman, Superwoman, were all created on the back of idol worship. This thing they call Halloween, that is so fashionable that they do every October, November, is all their recreation of idol worship. So this guy said that unless we can change the thinking of the African, that we are not going to be able to capture them. And that's exactly what you reiterated here. So we really, really have a big problem as to how to tackle this thing and how to come together to make it happen. But then please tell us a little bit about the security situation here. And then I'll turn it over for question and answer. Maybe the next time we ask you over, we had a video on insecurity. I don't know how long it is or how relevant it is now, but I like the flow that we're enjoying. How long is it? 4 minutes. Okay, do you want to show it before he speaks, or do you want him to speak on insecurity now? Okay, very quickly, and then let's see it, and then he can then give us his opinion on insecurity, and then Pastor Sonny and Jumoke can then take us to the Q&A. Thank you very much, my brother. This has been very, very instructive, and I think it is a conversation that we must really, really give life to and see how we can pull it down to the average consciousness of our people. Are you ready with your video, or should we just go on?
Pastor, please, let's go on.
Let's go on. Forget about that video. We'll show it another day. My dear brother, please, let's not break this flow. Speak on insecurity or whatever else you think is relevant to where we have landed today. And then Sonny and Jumoke can take the Q&A.
Okay, thank you very much again, sir. Now, Obafemi Awolowo said something also, and by now you realize I'm one of his students, really, just as I'm to do a student as well. The power to think clearly, correctly, and scientifically is the greatest of all powers that a man can possess. Now, concerning Nigeria's security situation, I had a series of visions. I think it was in 1999 about what was going to come to pass in the country. But knowing full well that Nigeria is not a Christian, quote, only nation, it was clear that I couldn't speak the language of the pulpit. Fortunately for me, I met with Dr. Christopher Collody, who gave me a piece of counsel that was golden. And he said, listen, the pulpit will limit those that you can reach when you want to discuss issues like this. So he asked us then to establish an NGO and all that and all that. So this is it. We went into Kaduna then, and they said, the newspaper said 50 people had died. But when our representative, Pastor Mike David, went into Kaduna, I asked him to go in there to go and look at the situation, bring me an assess, and give me a report. He came back shaking. This is somebody who's been a Christian since he was like 9 years old. He came back and said to me, all I want now is like, give me guns. And I'm like, you? Even tempered SU? Give you guns? What could be going on? So I went over to Kaduna. And truly, you see, media is a force expander. They've been controlling the reporting of terror from way back. I got in Kaduna, found that it was gruesome. Ekwa Church, Baptist Church, Lemur, you name it. It was gruesome. I'm talking about the fact that more like 1,000 or 2,000 were killed, and the papers reporting 50. We had put together maybe ₦1 million from church. Then I had said them, this is 1990 something, and I said, take this, go share amongst the families. And the guy said to me, look, this doesn't even go anywhere. So I went over to Kaduna, and I looked, and from that point onwards, I began to talk to the CAN officials. who are still my friends. Some of them are gone. People like Archbishop Achigili, they are late now. People like Dr. Chris Abashia, those others are late. But I still think Professor... anyway, those people, we gathered together and we began to notice that these things were happening regularly. And they had a pattern to it. And it was so obvious to me that the Christians would just gather together, will mourn our own and bury them. So much so that practically behind the palaces of certain emirs, they used to always have something they used to call the emir's graveyard, which was actually meant for the corpses of Christians. So when we noticed this, while we were busy there, they called me again that something else has happened somewhere else in northern Nigeria. They called me out and said something else has happened here. And then I said, wait a minute, Lord, what are we doing here? We were supplying mattresses, we were supplying succor, you know what I'm saying, counseling and all that. But it dawned on me that the more we helped, the more somebody was creating widows. So it behooved us to locate the foundation, the root problem of this thing. And the truth is this, over the next few years, I toured northern Nigeria. And I found out that, listen, when I say there's complicity in government, people try to argue. The late Emeka Omera was a very good friend and a yoke fellow in Christ. And I must tell you that the Methodist Church did a lot in those earlier years. The under Prelate Mbang. And then I'll tell you too that the Baptists too, they really rose to the occasion. By the time we finished touring northern Nigeria, I was doing what they call, now I can talk freely. But for years, I was doing what they call security meetings, gathering all leaders together, leaders of thought, leaders of church, and saying to them, listen, we have seen something here. There's a method to the madness. And this thing is going to create trouble. I remember Plateau State. I was in Riyom in 2002 or so, the year David Silas was killed. After I'd gone to Riyom and checked all that, we were back in Plateau State, and one of my now friends who hated me then in Plateau State, who was a pastor then, who ended up carrying a gun around trying to defend his flock before we pleaded with him to yield that area. They said to us then that, don't we know the meaning of JOS, Jesus Only State? I said, no. We've been tracking this Hydra. Even where Jesus Christ preached, the Hydra subdued it. Once the Christian goes to sleep, once the Christian doesn't understand that God doesn't want us to dominate others, he wants us to make disciples, one, for church, but also to disciple nations as well. Once we don't realize that and they picture us as the opponent and we prove to be opponents, there is something that is satanic. It is not religious. And I had such a problem. You know, initially I thought it was religious because Islam kept showing up. Until I realized that the same supremacist agenda had used Pope Urban to start what we call the Crusades and killed many. So the first challenge we have right now is that we don't know that there's a difference between things that are satanic and things that are religious. What is troubling Nigeria is a globally documented resurgence of religious extremism. It wears a religious disguise. It is not really religious. It couldn't care less. And I remember when I advised 4 generations of CAN presidents. So I don't think there's any other body in Nigeria that is higher to serve than in CAN. And I can tell you something. A particular CAN president, when they wanted to do the strategy based on Christian versus Muslim, I said, don't do that. They said to me, why? I said, because this thing is going to slaughter Muslims as well, who stand in its way. They said, no. Look, a few weeks later, it began to slaughter Muslims. It is slaughtering Muslims still now. So what am I trying to point out to us is that in Nigeria, we are being tackled by a global problem with a local face. It's extremely intelligent. It studies the host. It normally collapses from within. It has already infiltrated Nigeria in high places. In the last dispensation under President Muhammad Buhari, a known Al-Qaeda operative was made and confirmed as a federal minister, and he served his term to the end. So what I'm talking about here is something that is persuasive. It's a hydra. It has its tentacles. Look, in 2012, we had a hearing on Nigeria in Washington. Okay? I was a part of the team that went to Washington. Look, when I got there, we found out that its lobby is there as well. So while we sleep in Nigeria, thinking that we can determine the future of Nigeria from within alone, this global hydra is not only kinetics, it's not just guns. First of all, they came into Nigeria with a new war form that was well designed. All the old generals, like I keep saying, if you trained under Clausewitz, Trinity of War and all that, it's all outdated. We are dealing with asymmetrical warfare. We are dealing with hybrid threats. We are dealing with an army that has no rules of engagement. You're dealing with something that is global, that fights not from the head. It's not about democracy. It's not about socialism. It's from the heart that it fights. And it's supremacist. It has a supremacist agenda, and it has all the so-called platforms of, what do they call those things, mind molders of culture. It has its own version and its modes that in media in Nigeria, let me tell you this, to get them to report the killing of Christians in northern Nigeria in those days was an uphill task. I will remember one particular fellow he was a Christian, I just won't mention his name, in Guardian then. When we found out they would not publish, we began to make moves to ensure that the media will begin to carry this news. I can't go into all the tactics that we use now or the strategies. But I remember there was a particularly stubborn Christian, Guardian newspapers then, top level guy. Even after we paid for 2 pages just to publish in a tactful way what was going on, he rejected and refused. Christian. So it took us years. I can tell you something, there are heroes in Nigeria who are not even pastors. Many of them laid their lives down. They put their jobs down on the line for us to get across, to break into the media, to begin to even publish the atrocities that was happening to the Christians. Now, I said this thing is so intelligent that talking about religion, you are actually increasing it, because the strategy it uses is to divide a community based on religious lines. Why? Because then automatically it has them versus us. It has divided the community. So if anybody wants to beat it, you need to unify across religious lines. You can't afford to keep dividing. If not, the catchment area for radicalization, you are increasing it. Now, I've spoken about this to the public in Nigeria over the decades, and honestly, your folks will tell you that once they mentioned your name, I said I can't refuse Itwa, because I had said I was not giving any more interviews in Nigeria to the public. We've spoken on public platforms for decades. Look, there are details of these things that even only military minds would understand. Strategists. All other nations have sat down and have tweaked this thing. We cannot, because we are riddled with moles in high places. And then, unfortunately, the religious institutes are also victims of the foundational flaws. So instead of us drawing a bridge, I wrote a position, for instance, because there was a time when American dollars were being used to further terrorist activities in Nigeria. So we wrote a position then, and we were asking for benchmarks and a change. Because at the table that was being sponsored, there were Christian leaders, there were Muslim leaders, and there were terrorists. And there was no sieve, as it were, to strain. So I'm talking about the fact that this is not something, fire brigade, it's not something we're going to sit down, armchair, watch my colleague here. No. We've done that for years. If we really want to move forward, we need to, first of all, get the church leadership to become living sacrifices. You don't take out the Hydra, the dragon, that's what it is really. If you look at the dragon in the book of Revelation, chapter 12, it has 7 heads and 10 horns. One of the heads is religion. The entire ensemble itself is the dragon. That's satanic. That's much more that's different from religious problem. It takes a different strategy altogether to handle it. So the point is I can tell you that across the world, there are enough Christians, enough people, not even just Christians, people who just fear God across the world. Nobody defeats this thing with a local effort alone. So we're going to have to mature. Even if the church wants to lead in Nigeria, we need church leaders who are living sacrifices. Why? I was talking to a church leader once about one thing. No, I was talking to a governor once in one of the security meetings, and he laughed and said to me, "Be careful." I said, "Why?" He now narrated to me how years earlier, somebody close to him who was also in position had been given a loan. How many $1 million loan? At maybe 3 or 4% interest rate. But he had to go to Sudan to sign for it. And nobody was calling in the loan. So you ask me, when anything happens in Nigeria, even within the church, do you think they have any problems knowing everything that's going on in the church? Because the Hydra has looked at the Nigerian church and said, look, things are different from the days of Ajayi Crowther. Remember that in 1821, it was the same Fulani who kidnapped Ajayi Crowther in the Southwest. Okay? The same Fulani are kidnapping today. But it's not the Fulani. The Fulani are just being used. The intelligentsia behind this thing is global. And it's sharp, well informed. So if we are going to beat it, we're going to have to make sure that we have Christian leaders who are living sacrifices. First of all, if you're not ready to be living sacrifice, forget it. You can't handle this thing because they will either locate how much you cost and pay you, come against you with occultism, do all sorts, try fair. I remember the first time they told me my name was on the Boko Haram, what they call those their lists, those love lists, when they want to come and love you. What do they call those lists?
Fatwa.
Fatwa. Let me tell you the truth. In those days, we were the ones who set up early warning systems across the country in the terror-prone zones. Before the SSS began to call me, I had the list with me 6 weeks earlier. And this was just church. This is just church. I'll give you another one where we have to be careful. I remember Osun State. We were almost in trouble because they were already giving a bad name to Aregbe Shola in Osun State that he was Boko Haram, blah, 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 blah. Let me openly confess now. It was under my purview at that time to bring in Northerners and plant them within those zones to listen to conversations and give me a report. By that time, the Northern gave me a report. They were not going to church when they came there. They were going to, other places and all that, mixing. They started laughing at Yoruba people. They said, who said Aregbe is not a terrorist at all? There's this people they call Taun in, what they call that, in Iwo. And by the time I got the report, I just looked and I said, please stop it. But the media had already begun to push that narrative that he was a terrorist. And the moves had started to reach him. Fortunately for him, he and Prof are very good friends. And one is a Christian, one is a Muslim, but they're extremely good friends. So they talked these things out through and found out that the Omoluabi ethos, again, is one of the algorithms when we get to that point that have to be deployed when we're serious about solving this problem. So honestly, my brother, I can tell you the truth is that there is no way I can summarize or talk about this, something of this level in so many minutes. And even security experts who don't upgrade themselves regularly cannot even keep up with the flow of this Hydra.
Right. Sonny, over to you. Thank you so much.
All right, Pastor. Thank you very much, Pastor. We are past 6 now, and I think there are some special people on the program. I don't know whether they would like to say anything. Pastor Rapu is here, Pastor Kasali is here. But we do have some hands. Pastor Ladi Thompson, you are welcome, sir. I have been following your work, like you said, since 1999, during that Plateau crisis. And you have been speaking on TV and all of that. The way we run the program is you have spoken so well, but we have a few hands up. We'll allow them to we may take about 3 questions. I hope you can note them down. And some may be comments, some may be questions for you. And then you take it 3 at a time. I will take Boluwaji Fanimo first, then Dr. Akin Fakpohunda, and then Pastor Funke Awolowo. I'll take those 3, and please restrict your questions to a minute. We really, really plead. There are a lot of people on the program today, so if you can just, restrict it to 60 seconds, straight to the question or straight to your comment, and then we'll take it that way. Thank you very much. Go ahead.
Yeah, good evening all.
Good evening, sir.
Pastor Ladi Thompson, I thank you for all those observations and the points you have raised. My question is actually on 3 observations I have. You see, the first one is the technological development challenges on our security. I want us to look into that in the area of training and trackers. You see, the second question I have is concerning the operational challenges we're facing in Nigeria. Please, this one is even more degradative than any security that we can talk about, and people did not know. Let me give you an instance. You see, I was working in order to make my head meet at Owena checkpoint, Ondo to Akure, Owena checkpoint. Then a police officer that was discussing with driver that I did not even know said that what we at the back are discussing is because we are making jest of him because we want to collect 20 naira from driver. He has to order all of us out, beating us. That is around to 10 p.m. Send us inside bush. Now, what if there is a dung hole in that bush? And he nearly shooting us again, if not because of his friend that intervened. Now, look at that police brutality at that stage. Just because I'm coming from a pool company where I went to go and check as a checker to hand my daily meat. Now, let me give you the second one. The media challenges too, just as you mentioned. People that owns media outlets or those that have friends in the journalists, they are also using it to oppress. You can imagine the way they will twist words and are sending it across and making you feel uncomfortable even in your domain. I have seen where security of my school, I graduated from Yaba, then Olawepo was the chief security officer. He will oppress students. I remember when they first killed Monday Omokwegbe, and I fought for it.
What's the
Please,
question, sir? Yeah.
my question is that what can we do to the operational challenges that is even making our security to prone to anarchy in this country? Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Dr. Akinfakpunda, please go ahead and ask your question now.
Yes, sir. The talk today is very brilliant. We've been given all the issues we are, but in Nigeria, there's a dispute, foundational dispute. When there's a dispute with all parties, there has to be a means to call them to talk. Towards the independence in 1960, we went to Lancaster House to discuss, and somehow somebody moderated and there was an agreement. 1960. 67, General Ankara in Ghana called Nigerians again to a meeting at Aburi. There was an agreement, an accord. Though one said he was sick, whatever it is. Don't you think we now need to work towards a third modality for us to talk? Who can call us to order that we shall respect? The way we respected the British in 1260, the way General Ankara was respected to call us to Aburi in 1967. Can we move towards having somebody who can call us to a talk so that we can now reach an accord again? Otherwise, we continue the way it is now.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. We'll take Pastor Funke Awolowo. You've been asked to unmute. Kindly unmute yourself, ma'am.
Yes, thank you. Good evening. Good evening, Pastor Ladi. Yes, I remember you. I think we've interacted a couple of times. Well done. I have always known you to be very deep. And you mentioned something about programming. And I remember that Hitler's Germany was based on this kind of programming where they did propaganda and all that. And at the end of the day, like the guy you mentioned, Hitler's plan was to burn all the documents, and he made a plan. But fortunately, we know that sometimes you have to unravel secrets to go forward. Germany was able to capture some of the things that will help them. Unfortunately, we are not so intentional when it comes to things like that. But yes, these people, they have a plan to, all the Morgenthau plan, all the Marshall plans, they have a plan. We don't have a plan. But we had something that they met on ground. And I'm thinking, why can't we go back? Why can't we go back and strategize based on Africans for Africans, and all that. Then I want to ask you, what do you have against us doing the restructure program? Because as it were, what you are changing the mindset of the people, telling us right now, changing the mindset of people will take almost a whole generation. The psyche is very hard and fast. And what can we do? And what can we do based on what you said to ease on this restructuring program? Because we need to go forward. And then thirdly, because I see that you're almost praising Tinubu, what do you have for and against this Muslim ticket? Thank you.
Thank you. That was about 5 questions loaded in one. But I will allow Pastor Ladi Thompson to answer. If you will be very brief with your answers also, so that we can take more people that have.
Okay, let me try and put all these are very poignant questions. Yeah. Let me try to put them all together, from the technology one to the algorithms of Pastor Funke and the consensus building that our elder also has talked about. Now, putting it all together, first of all, let us remember something, that in problem solving, there's a principle that says the greater contains the lesser. There will be 6 in 7 and 7 in 8. 8 will be in 9. So sometimes when we go for the greater and we resolve it, a lot of the other stuff will, resolve themselves. So what I would say is that even getting technology and all that is not really the issue, because what we're at right now is in a phase where we're approaching the Third World War. Is no longer about philosophy, sociology, and all that. The Hydra destroying Nigeria works from the heart. It can use a child playing football to come and launch an explosive. It doesn't mind using a pregnant woman. It has absolutely no conscience. It's a global problem. And that's why nationalism is rising across the globe as a response. But you see, if you fight fire with fire, we'll not get anywhere. But I believe that Nigeria and Africa, we're the ones who will have to solve this. So first of all, to get Nigeria to the place where we become a solution, we need to first of all let people realize that the best future is not always a function of the past. No, the best future is always a product of creative innovation and disciplined execution. So if you sit down and think, we can borrow a leaf from His Royal Highness Sheikh Maktoum of Dubai, who said, when you are faced with a problem, you can either sit down and do your research and do what other people have done before, or you can think of something that has never been thought of before. And once you can get that done, you get a result nobody has ever gotten. Now, for the Nigerian case, like what the elder said about bringing us together, in this modern age, we have found out that people used to think that everything rises and falls with leadership. But as we granulate it, we find out that actually everything rises and falls with effective communication. So what we really need right now in the digital age, or whatever it is that we're in right now, AI, is to be able to find a way of effectively communicating across the entire nation at the same time, hitting people's homes directly, eliminating the middlemen. Now, Nigeria has been constructed for us not to be able to judge without fighting, without war. So one of the algorithms to reprogram Nigeria is the introduction of nonviolent communication as a standard platform for all discussions. That can be implemented in 3 months. If elders of the country, everybody gathers together and we present to the government, do this and put that together and say, look, this is it. If we introduce nonviolent communication, it should be in the curriculum in the schools as well. Nonviolent communication is a part of the Omoluabi ethos. That's why in our language they say apologies have the male and the female aspect to them, as it were. Now, what am I trying to point out here to us is that if we implement the algorithms, a lot of the problems that are being discussed here will not even come into focus at all. Now, I must tell you that when I spoke about Tinubu breaking the code, I was not talking in an admiring way. I was talking facts and figures. And if you listen to me on TV, I have spoken and given my own, well, initially I did say that there wasn't any honor for anybody to serve in this dispensation, as far as I was concerned, haven't seen how he was able to break the code. But however, having taken a whole look at everything, I find out that Even the president of the country is a victim, because all of us are victims of superior architectural thought. And if we don't find a way of discussing together and stop pointing fingers, this is what they want us to do, and we're going to do it forever. Now, let me say something that Obafemi Awolowo said that I think applies now. I did say that if Baba was alive today, knowing him, his application of artificial intelligence tools, machine learning tools, would shock everybody. So nowadays, we don't even need to call the entire nation together to do certain things. We can make it a digital platform meeting. It will be more effective than anything that ever was when we went to London, to Lancaster House, or even the one that was held in Abuja. The digital platform is very effective if we know how to use it. Now, Awolowo said something, said, it is, I believe, generally agreed that political freedom is meaninless unless it goes hand in hand with economic freedom. Anyone who cares to read his history right will readily concur that the prime and sole motivation, now in his own days, for imperialist traditions, conquest and rule is economic in character. If the imperialist powers can accomplish their economic exploitation of weaker nations without political control, they prefer to do it. Now, what are we trying to point out is this. Listen, if we look at what he did for us in the Western region, a lot of the stuff that we're talking about today would not even come up, where citizens are well cared for, where the value of the life of every citizen is weighty. The lowest common factor, the problem in Nigeria today is that the average citizen's life has no value. And there's nothing anybody can do anywhere. That's why people will sell their votes for 5,000 naira. That's why, look, when you sit in southern Nigeria, especially in Lagos at times, there's an illusion and a delusion as to what life is in Nigeria. Until you travel around all Nigeria, go find out when they were doing the market money thing. There are people who've never seen 20,000 naira in one place together. So we need to be careful. It's a massive nation, 220 million plus people. So when we are going to plan for them, we're going to realize this. We need to get the country to see that we have a better future together. In 1950, what was that? Obafemi Awolowo did mention something like that, and I wish I could find that quote of his when he said we need to build a new structure that is far grander in stature, in scope. There are certain things he asks us to do that if we follow what Obafemi Awolowo asks us to do, we will know why it is actually better to go that way. If we try to go the other way, there are people who are very envious. For instance, when the Yoruba Nation people come and make their pitch with me, I had meetings with Pa Adebanjo before he left. If anybody will tell the truth, they know that we had a series of meetings in Pa Tomi's house, which we organized to bring certain leadership together. It was part of the algorithms that we're working on. And it had to be truncated because having to persuade people first before we are able to mount the kind of operations that we need to set the country on the right path, especially when it's altruistic, when nobody's going to come and take a chieftaincy title out of it. It's very difficult to locate that anywhere. So we had to truncate it. In fact, some people derailed it and turned it into handshake across the Niger. But the truth is, all the thinking behind it, all the homework behind it, if you go and ask Patu Tomi, if you go and ask all the elders of the Afenifere still alive, ask the elders of the community still alive, they'll tell you that we had a meeting chaired by Dr. Christopher Kolade, chaired by Professor Anya, and they were the ones who helped us to build the consensus for the first time that could have changed the face of the game. Let me stop there for now.
Thank you, sir. We're going to take more hands up. We're going to take, we have about 6-7 hands up. iPhone 13 Pro Max, we're going to ask you to please rename yourself before we call you, just to curb hackers. So I'm going to take Auntie Yemisi. I'm going to take Bright Trends Consulting, and then I'm going to take Oluseun Adesonya. So iPhone, please go ahead and rename yourself before we call you. Thank you. Auntie, please go ahead with your question. If we can just keep it brief so that we can take everyone that is here. We've asked you to unmute. 1 minute or less. Auntie Yemisi, please go ahead and unmute.
Okay. Thank you. I've just unmuted now, given permission by you. Pastor Ladi Thompson, Mr. Ransom Kuti here.
Ah, hello, man. A long time.
Yes, the struggle continues.
Yes.
It's very sad that we're still at ground zero in terms of solving these problems in spite of all the efforts that's gone on in the past. But there are just two things I want you to clarify. Who are these hands? Can we be more specific? These satanic hydra-headed monsters that are behind, if you can have some names, if you are able to do that, who are they? That's number one. Or which nations or which organizations? Let's have some clarity on that. And two, your solution is that, and a lot of people keep talking of elite consensus and all of that. You have told us that you even tried bringing a Patitomi, a Pa Adebanjo, and all of these guys together. The problem I have always seen with Nigeria is that there are too many big egos all over the place. I don't know how to couch where it comes from, whether we cannot find a handful of people. Doesn't have to be many who are
Did we lose our audio? Okay, I believe so. Until we lost you. So I'm going to take
am I still
okay
with you? Okay.
Yeah, you're back now. We lost you there for a minute.
Oh, sorry. While we cannot find 5-6 people join you, Pastor Itwa is there. People that you can rely on, who can craft these ways forward that you are talking about. It just baffles me that all the efforts are being made here and there. Groups get together, coalition, this and all of that. And at the end of the day, there's always sabotage. Can we not find 5 good people who are ready to create that pathway, that strategy for us to break the jinx? And I am giving you that responsibility to take the lead, to find 5 people. This is Ladi Thompson 1. We're going to have a Ladi Thompson 2, so that you can come and report back to us that you have found these people, that you are, other nations have their think tanks and their powerful people behind this. We don't want to hear their names. Just do it, and let's follow up in a way that we begin to see the results.
Okay.
And I'm giving you that responsibility. Thank you very much for all that you do. We will continue to to monitor your talk, and we want to see more action. Thank you, Jumoke, for giving me the opportunity, and Pastor Itwa too, and all the ALG team. Keep up the good work, but we want to see more action and less talking. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Rotimi Amechi, and I don't know if this is the governor, but please go ahead.
My name is Jimmy Rotimi Amechi. Good evening, gentlemen, and
good evening.
Pastor Ladi Thompson. I just want to ask a question to Pastor Ladi Thompson. Are you actually differentiating between, are you able to separate between poverty and insecurity?
Okay. Thank you for keeping, is that your question?
Of course, because
thank you for keeping it very short.
I listened to him, and he did not do quite a lot of justice when it comes to the role poverty, bad governance, and all that have done in creating insecurity. You cannot, there is no way, no matter how much religion you put on top of insecurity, that you're able to differentiate between, you're able to separate poverty from insecurity.
Okay. Thank you very much for keeping it short. Bright Trends, we'll take those 3, and if you can answer that, if you can address those, sir, then we'll take the other sets. Yeah. Bright Trends, please go ahead with your question.
Thank you, everybody. My name is Shaya Obishason. I just happen to be the CEO of Bright Consulting. Now, my question is this. At the 5th colloquium lecture in honor of Pastor Ighodalo, a lot of people came. I attended, and we were able to judge your talking, have insight, share insight, analyze, and all that. And then at the end of the day, when the program was rounded up, there were a list of activities and a list of visions that are to be shared that will boost leadership in Nigeria, perhaps in West Africa. I want to know what we are doing about this. Maybe this actually has a pathway to Pastor Ighodalo. The second one is that I'm glad that this is all about leadership. In recent times, we have seen how leadership can shape a country. Even in West Africa, for instance, we have seen Senegal, how a young man will come and just try to actually envision what the country should be doing in the next decade or so, and it's moving forward. Let's move to Burkina Faso. There is a young man, a military general. I don't support military regimes, but we could see the impact that the young man is making. Now we have another opportunity, and I'm glad that Mr. Rotimi Amici is here. He may not remember me, but we have discussion on leadership. How can we, as a community, actually help leadership in this country, given that in the next 3 years, we will be having another round of election? And with the way things are currently, we all know how things are going. I don't have to mention here. The second one is, I believe that we are all Christians here. And I was just watching a video recently, and I saw how the timelines are actually being fulfilled based on the second coming of Jesus Christ. In fact, I actually observed that this recent Iran and Israeli war is actually part of the fulfillment towards the end time. So as Christians, what level of urgency does it put on us, and what level of responsibility as a group and as individual? Those are my two questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. If I could also have Oluseun Adesanya take his, we've asked you to unmute. Please go ahead with your question.
Okay, good evening, everyone. And I want to say thank you to Pastor Itwa. Can you hear me, please?
We can hear you. Please go ahead.
Okay, Pastor Ladi and everyone on this call. Just two questions. One, in the aspect of security, missing out one vital area, which is the involvement of traditional rulers. I believe they are critical in finding lasting solution to security challenges in Nigeria. So I want to suggest, if there is going to be a think tank, let them also factor them into it. The second thing is the bit of what happened 2 years ago. I think at the time, if you are a Christian and you are supporting the present government, people just think you are an antichrist. And I think the responsibility lies with the leadership of the church. So this is my suggestion. I think the church needs to look at raising righteous people that will influence the society more effectively than any other thing. I know a lot of things has been done, but I just want to plead with all the sacrifice being made by our father of faith, if there could be a more focus on raising competent people who will care so much about this nation than any other thing. My last question, and this is a suggestion also, is that I don't think the problem we have in Nigeria is about leadership. I think the problem we have in Nigeria is about principle. What do I mean by principle? Until the life of a common man is at the center of our policy making, we can never get anything right. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you very much, sir. If you could answer those, but before you do, I just want to clarify. Yes, this platform is founded by a pastor, a Christian, and most of us are Christians, but it is a non-partisan, a non-religious platform where we discuss national issues. We cater to all Nigerians, irrespective of what their religion, tribe, or gender is. So just wanted to make that clarification. Thank you. Go ahead, sir. If you can take those three, and then we'll take the next
three
set.
contain 4 or 5 each. But let me first start with Auntie's charge. Let me first say that I know the work that I do I believe that there are leaders on this platform who are consensus builders. There are people who call and 20,000 people will respond. There are different giftings.
Hello.
There are different giftings in the body of Christ. So I think my own work is more of showing of hard sentences, studying, locating solutions. I've been special advisors in different capacities. Right now, I'm serving as the Deputy Secretary General to the 6th region of the African Union. And I'm doing some work in North America. The head office is in Canada. And it's all a part of the fact that we need to prepare outside as well for what I believe the time will come when Nigeria will begin to be sorted out. So, but having said that, let me take on the next question, because you see, politicians will think about the next election. Statesmen will think about the next generations. Now, when we begin to talk about the issue of poverty and the issue of starvation and security and so on and so forth, I remember at a meeting once when we met with the former Prime Minister of England, Tony Blair, and he kept talking to me about this Hada, the Sahel, this and that being the cause of, terrorism and insecurity in Nigeria. I was a bit taken aback, and I did say to him that it's interesting that when 7/7 happened in England, in London, 7/7 happened in London, nobody said it was a farmer herders clash, and nobody thought it was a Sahelian movement or whatever. They looked at it for what it was, ideological, a supremacist agenda. Then number two, we need to remember that the sole dynamic, according to Obafemi Awolowo, in any situation anywhere, the wealth of a nation is not really measured by its skyscrapers, gold, silver, and all these things that people talk about. The greatest wealth of every nation is the individual. There's potentials in people. Look, there are nations that don't have steel that became the greatest producers of automobiles for a season in global history. So the truth be told, in Africa, we have learned to suffer with dignity. What has been lacking so far is a focused vision. The people are good. Our people are good. Our people have taken hits that no other nation can take. So let's be very, very pop and plain about this. The hunger, the lack of service delivery, and so on and so forth is not a function of the insecurity. The insecurity is a different matter altogether. Now, the Hydra is opportunistic. And when it sees a careless nation that doesn't take care of its assets, doesn't value the life of its citizens, then it capitalizes on that. So let us remember the 10 golden years in the Western region. Frankly speaking, before Obafemi Awolowo instituted the action group, some people will say, look, why are you talking about this? Excuse me, let us be factual. Let us mathematize inquiry and accept for a fact that those 10 golden years were extraordinary for any African nation in the history of mankind. So there are things we need to take from it before we can project forward. Now, so many other questions that came are still said to us again that the greater contains the lesser. This thing is not as difficult. I said to you, the Rubik's Cube is a problem that looks unsurmountable. 10 generations will try, they can't solve. One person with algorithms will solve it in 6 minutes. I think that should be the take home as far as I'm concerned. I'm ready to serve. I'm going to talk to Pastor Itwa, as long as we can find time, anything to do with the future of our country. For instance, Nigeria is supposed to be the lead nation of Africa. The other day we were talking about how I was at an international meeting and we were talking about, and I raised the issue. It is said that all the contribution of Africa to the global GDP is that our contribution, all African nations put together, is about 2.7% last year. And I said to ourselves that, excuse me, there's some voodoo mathematics going on here. Why don't we have leaders who can build consensus and realize that if we shut down exports for 3 months, it will be clear that our contribution to the global GDP is not 2.7%. I think we are victims of not thinking, more than instinctive. You see, Nigeria has, because of the military years, Nigeria has developed this fire brigade approach to everything. Everybody just wants to jump up, hey, let's go do this, let's go. No. Albert Einstein said you cannot solve a problem with the same level of thinking when it was created. You need to think deeply, think well, granulate properly, come up with a winning plan, and then execute with discipline. I really don't know how many of those, because it's, oh my God, everything is just flying in so many directions, honestly. But I keep saying that there are algorithms. Algorithms don't fail. Let us put together the consensus that needs to be built. Remember, I said to you that Nigeria is a simultaneous equation. If you solve the problem within Nigeria, ignore the ones coming from outside that make our currency, for instance, excuse me, an American dollar is about 30-something Ghanaian cedis or 40-something Ghanaian cedis. How do we explain that? That the same American dollar is 1,700, or what 1,700 naira. It means that there's a lot of things that are not in the textbooks that determine all these things. And if our people will calm down enough, I am very sure it doesn't take 12 people to craft something that the nation can run with. Just as in the case of America in 1776, it didn't take 10 people to craft the program on which America has prospered. So let's learn from the past, bequeath something good to our children, because the children are asking questions already. And there are things we can fix now. I was talking to, I think it was Professor Uruku, late Professor Uruku, Dr. Kalade, Chingo, some elders, you know, who I can count as worthy elders. And I said, look, there are certain questions that if we don't answer them now, and we leave them, by the time the next generation goes and we still leave them, the younger generations will never have the depth of thought to be able to address foundational issues. They will go with presumption and run around in circles all their lives again. Pastor Itra.
Thank you. So we have about 4 more hands up, sir, and then a few questions in the chat. So we'll take Dr. Rotimi, Madam Ronke. Okay, go ahead.
Now, you say, because you have abandoned me again. Pastor Tua, thank you for this meeting, for bringing my brother that ran away and abandoned me. Pastor Ladi abandoned me. So what Pastor Ladi was talking about that we had meeting at Patitomi is Yigba.
Thank you.
You remember Yigba?
Yes.
He was the one spearheading that meeting. And after a while, I continued to pursue him. How far? Maybe you will tell us something about it here. But there's not a lot of work in this area. And I pray that as we are gathered here, this is strategic, and I believe it's ordained by God. Because as you speak, there's a strategic meeting being held by AU now, as we are here, concerning Africa. And you all know that if Africa is going to move forward, Nigeria must move forward. This is one thing that's paining me right now, that we need to do something. So I will pray, I will implore you, Pastor Itua, with Pastor Ladi, put us together and give us a road forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. So in this set, we'll take Madam Ronke. Please go ahead with your question. We've asked you to unmute. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. And good evening, Pastor Ladi, for a brilliant session. And thanks, Pastor Utua, for this initiative. My name is Ronke Adiagbo, and I'm a chartered accountant based in the UK, but I did set up an NGO called IA Foundation. And the reason I had to set up this foundation is because I was very worried about the number of out-of-school children in Nigeria. At the moment, UNESCO puts it at 18.3 million. So that is very worrying. And how any government will sleep at night with that kind of children roaming the street, I wonder. Now, as we all know, one of the main reasons for out-of-school children is insecurity, right? So if these children on the street are not getting education, there's no prizes for guessing that they too will become a conduit for these bandits. And then the issue of insecurity will perpetuate. Now, Pastor, would you have any idea how we can resolve this issue of out-of-school children to ensure that they don't serve as feeder for bandits and to perpetuate insecurity in Nigeria? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. If you could take those 3 sets.
Good Lord. Well, you're right. It's very touching to see the out-of-school children issue. But again, let us remember that Obafemi Awolowo said something, I think this was in 1972. He was talking to the Christian laity of Nigeria when he said there's an urgent and massive need for moral and spiritual reconstruction, the kind which will help to demolish morbid desire for naked power and domination and ensure justice, equity, and fair play for us all. Now, I said to you there are some foundational issues and there are secondary issues. If today the education is what it is in Nigeria today, it is not a chance or a happenstance. It's a result. It's a deliberate result. When you hear the word Boko Haram, the coinage, the Western coinage of Boko Haram, you must always realize that there have been policies all along in northern Nigeria to keep people away from education. We need to persuade. We need to get together. Already the average northerner has realized the need for education. There's no deceiving. And that's why the terrorists have focused on that to take them out. But having said that, let us look again from a very holistic perspective at the issues that we're still discussing here. Every man in this world, if we remember consultants use one chart, what they call that one for human needs. Pastor Ito, please help me out here. The pyramid that shows Maslow. Thank you, Maslow. Now, there's nothing. Look, the average human unit himself is a program. There's some basics that everybody needs.
Maslow hierarchy of needs.
Hierarchy of needs. Maslow hierarchy of needs. There's some basics that everybody needs. And if you look at those things, that's where you find out that when a leader sits down to construct a program that will favor his nation, he takes care of all these things. The moment he does not plan for it, the problems will come. If Africa is a nation of beggar nations today, look, both failure and success are constructs. They're constructs. You don't arrive at them by buying lottery tickets. Look at, for example, what Dr. Rotimi was talking about. When we looked ahead and we saw the kind of recruitment challenges and the tribal issue, one of the algorithms we agreed was that we're going to do a systemic merging together to reunite the nation. So we started with one of the toughest blocks, which was to put the Yorubas and the Igbo, who for whatever reason are always at loggerheads. We went through history and found out it wasn't like that. And by the time we granulated everything, we discovered where the root of the thing had come from. And one of the algorithms we said was love can be used to answer this very easily. Why? We found out that intermarriages, good Lord, the statistics of intermarriages between the Igbos and the Yorubas and, the Efiks and those and all that is even enough to build upon. Look, in South Africa, when Mandela came out in South Africa, they had a challenge. They built on, what they call that, the game again? Was it rugby? Rugby was what they used as a template on which they built an equation. Marriage alone, intermarriages. By the time I found out that Emeka Onyaku's wife is a Yoruba woman, Dr. Kolade's wife, she's Igbo. Go around the whole of the country and you'll find out that love has broken down many barriers and that all we need to do right now is to now build a program in which those things become relevant. I'll give you another example from America. Carpenter's Hall. There was a speech made by one of them, Patrick Henry, I think, in American history. When the people began to say, look, Virginians, Bostonians, New Englanders, we are no more. Now we are Americans. Now, why did they say so? They deliberately constructed the nation that the moment you are born, the advantages you have for being American is much more than the advantage you can ever get for being Virginian. It's much more than the advantages you can ever get for being a New Englander. So what am I trying to tell us to use this? When they were going to construct Nigeria, they knew that there were many cultural nations in Nigeria. They knew there was an Igbo enculturation. Every baby arrives, not Igbo, not Hausa, not Fulani, not Yoruba, at all in Nigeria. But enculturation is a program. The competencies of your culture are taught, verbal, non-verbal, and skills are taught to a child. So what we normally would want to do in Nigeria is to create such advantages for every child born in Nigeria. And the advantages should be much greater than anything the person can get from being an Igbo man or being a Hausa man or a Fulani man or a Yoruba man or an Edo or Efik. When we intelligently put together such a package, in a generation and a half, you will find out that loyalties will shift away from the subsets that protect today, the subsets that protect your identity, that protect your interest, into the major set that protects your overall interest. Look, I remember a while back, who was traveling, some relative of mine was traveling, and they got to some airport, there was a layover for so long, and the announcement came that all Americans to this side, non-Americans to the other side. And the woman says, the baby is American. Says, the baby is American? Move to the side where Americans are because of the baby. Everybody else sleep in the airport. All Americans, America will not understand if we keep you in the airport for so many hours. So when a nation values the life of its citizens, that's one of the basic building blocks. As long as that, look, politicians will speak from now to kingdom come, they have no value. And unfortunately, it has crept into the church. It's crept into religion as well. As long as you don't have value for the people around you, for their lives, excuse me, there's nothing that anybody can do. I hope I've tried enough to answer. Is there any other major one that I haven't covered there yet?
So I think, I don't know if you touched on the involvement of traditional rulers in addressing the insecurity challenges in Nigeria. And
Good.
then the separation of poverty and economics, if that can be separated.
Yes. Well, like we say again, if your foundation is wrong, there's no problem. Now, to address this issue, let me tell you something. I just want a proposal for Zambia. There's some Zambians that I'm consulting for right now. Not only Zambians, also the Liberians. It was America that started Liberia in 1822. We're working on a proposal for them right now, and we're pointing out that there's no single American-style democracy in Africa that's a success. And after granulating, we came to the fact that a lot of people will just take what they think America is practicing. Like Nigeria right now. Nigeria doesn't realize that America is not a democracy in the strict sense of it. It's a democratic republic. And not only that, it has a lot of firewalls built into its foundation. Introduce those same firewalls into Nigeria right now, and the self-corrections will start immediately. So what are we saying is that if we want to use a proper democratic republic in Nigeria, one of the suggestions I'm making, and we're writing a paper on it right now, I've submitted one to some of the clients we're working with, we need a pentagonal arrangement in Nigeria instead of the normal three-legged stool on which the Nigerian democracy, talking about the executive, what they call them now, the houses of upper and lower houses, and then the judiciary. We need to introduce two more. If we have studied Africa for long enough, and if we want to learn from the engineering that happened when 13 communities in Aboriginal Ife became the epicenter of a kingdom, we need to tweak it a bit and introduce a house of faith and a house of traditions. And each one will be so well structured with the checks and balances. Let me mention this because I know people know this already. When America was going to its first constitutional conference, when America was about to break up, they had a constitutional conference in, I think, 1787. It was meant to last a few days. It lasted almost 4 months. Now, they introduced something new that had never been seen before. Why? They went back to a guy called Polybius, who was a Greek philosopher. Polybius was the first person to look and say, look, kings become tyrants easily. Aristocrats become oligarchs. And when you look at pure democracies, it becomes mob rule easily. And he was the first to suggest that we can merge them together, introduce checks and balances, and make them work. And that was how this form of governance, that the American Democratic Republic, that's how it was forged. Now, there was a fellow from France, Montesquieu, a lawyer, who wrote The Spirit of the Laws. He also suggested, do you know at that conference, initially, the delegates suggested 4 presidents for America. Before they now explained to them that no, if you have 4 presidents, it will defeat the checks and balances of the system. As a king, the president ought to operate as a king when there are emergencies and there's a problem and we can't go join for too long or else the nation will lose. Then the presidency kicks in and takes charge. Now, the aristocrats who know how to keep money and all that, the upper and lower houses contain the aristocrats and the whatever part of it. The judiciary was brought in as a counterbalance because of the republicanism, respect for laws. Now, in Nigeria, the challenge is that the Almajiri in Kano does not relate with the title of a senator. What is a senator to him? He thinks the governor is an emir of some sort. No, he thinks the president of Nigeria, he thinks the governor is an emir of some sort, and that the president of Nigeria is a sultan of some sort. Those are the images in his mind. So there's a complete disconnect right now. And that's why you find out that unless we tweak this, if we introduce those two in the House of Faith, we will make sure that the House of Faith is charged with upright moral morality and the value system. That's all they're there to do. They must not violate it, and they will be given the power because it will be codified. This is going to be given the power to act as a check and balance on the other four. Then we have a House of Traditions. The House of Traditions is for you to come here, represent your culture, your cultural history, and make sure that it acts as a positive towards the future of the country. Now, in this area, a lot of American thinkers wanted to disagree with me on that because they have this thing about tribalism. And like you pointed out, these are the advantages we had that they saw and took apart from us. So my question to them was very simple. You claim that tribalism doesn't help in the democratic structure. You claim that it's retrogressive. You say that it's the root of corruption and all that. So why did God, the Almighty himself, why did he introduce a governance based on tribes in scripture? And that when you study the scripture properly, you'll find out that the tribal governance that God introduced came with instructions. That it was so well ordered and structured that if you put it right, it worked. Every time they violated it, then it will not work. So I put it to them that actually the tribal arrangements we have in Africa is actually an asset. It's re-engineering it properly to work as a whole so that each unit will be able to agree with all of the units to do what? Protect the value of the lives of those. Look at somebody like the Kabiyesi Gandhi now, for instance. And there are lots of educated people like that. Are you saying to me that if they have a House of Traditions and we have put checks and balances to make sure that they don't become a financial burden, because each constituency needs to be able to sponsor, is their interest has been recognized, we will write the rules of the game for checks and balances. But trust me, if we had empowered a House of Faith, empowered a House of Traditions to join the executive, to join with the judiciary, as well as the legislature, excuse me, Nigeria would move forward. And it wouldn't be as costly as it is. And corruption problem will be tackled as long as we keep the House of Faith and the House of Tradition, as long as we codify it, keep them away from the clutches of the executive and of course the upper and lower houses who can corrupt them.
Thank you, sir.
So,
I know we are up on time, so we're going to take this last 4 questions, and we're going to keep it very short. Please keep it very, very short because we're really up on time. And then we have a few that we're going to read from the chat room. So Dr. Mrs. Quincy Ayodele, please go ahead with your question. 60 seconds or less, and then we'll have Dr. Okelwo, Antibola, Adetula, and then the last is Adeshin of Agmenru Byron. Those are the last questions we're taking. Thank you.
Okay, good evening, Pastor Ladi. Good evening, Pastor Itwa, and good evening, Pastor Tony Rapo, and all other pastors in the house. Pastor Ladi, that was a very eye-opening presentation that you gave. You said we are going to reprogram. And I believe that reprogramming should start from the church. Who is going to be a living sacrifice? Pastor Tony Rapo and Pastor Itwa must answer that question, because why is Africa still doing anointing service with oil, anointing oil that is made from olive tree that does not grow in Africa? What grows in Africa is coconut oil, palm oil. We should start something. We should stop talking. Let's start an action.
And it must start from Nigeria. If we start with that first, then we can continue. Because why are you, Pastor, anointing our heads with olive oil? And olive tree does not grow in Africa. That's number one. So they can now do the remaining
If you please
economic
round up,
programming
Ma.
and the rest. I am a traditional medicine practitioner, and I use medicinal plants for management of diseases for Africans by Africa. So let's start doing the African things and apply our the original Bible. Old Testament did not happen in Europe. It started in Africa. River Jordan is in Africa. Egypt is in Africa. They have rewritten our Bible. I read Ethiopian Bible. I don't this KJV and KJV is the ones that they have rewritten. We have mental slavery. So let's start rebranding our mentality, starting from religious freedom. Like
Thank you very much.
what Pastor Ladi said. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Dr. Okelwo, please, 60 seconds or less, and then addition of Fagbenro. Please go ahead.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. Pastor Ladi Thompson. I'm one of your admirers and your fan. My chairman, Pastor Itwa. Good evening, sir. My question is going to be direct. And His Excellency Rotimi Amici asked a question earlier, which I want to share experience from what I won't say what I know, but what I suspected. How can we escape from our generals, retired generals, who are in control of the solid minerals in Benue State? We're talking about Californium. As we all know, if you may not know, this money is being made to sponsor terrorism. And because majority of these generals, retired generals, used to be CIA agents, and they work for American CIA. So now they are no longer in the service. Well, let me do a proper introduction. I was in the US Marine, and I retired as a major. So there are some few facts that I know, and I know that if we can stop this inflow of NGOs into Borno State, where these mineral resources that is costing so much in the world, a gram of Californium is 27 million US dollars, 1 gram. And we have a lot of this in Borno, and they never declared it as part of the mineral resources in Nigeria. This is the area I want you to look into, sir, Pastor Ladi, because we are used to these people up there. And why are they putting eyes away from this inflow? And we are going outside to be borrowing money. And we have buyers coming to take this thing through the NGOs into Nigeria. So I will reserve the remaining one for future. But I am particularly concerned about this. And most of the people behind this are generals who used to be a CIA members. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. So the last hand is additional Fagbenro Byron. Please go ahead with your question.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. I think from the outset, Nigeria started off living under denial. Denying identities, denying the only thing we appear to have accepted by calling ourselves a federation, is the fact that we are many. But a lot of us don't even understand the meaning of federation. A federation is a federation because it is a combination of many nations. To call Nigeria's diverse people tribes, I think we are doing ourselves an injustice. And we are being self-derogatory. So when you live under an illusion and you live a lie, and you don't even accept that you are diverse, how do you manage that diversity? The principal responsibility of any Nigerian leader is the ability to manage diversity. The principal reason that God created us It's not because he wanted us to be equal. All of us to be equal. We can't be equal. Everybody's got different skills, different skill sets, different patterns. We bring different cultures to the table. A bouquet of flowers with all the flowers the same color is as boring as hell. So the whole idea is that we come to the table with different skill, with diversity. And the challenge is to manage that diversity. The more we try to force a unity, right, the more we are shirking the responsibility, the actual responsibility of man. And there's a beauty in the ability to manage that diversity. So for me, until we get ourselves out of this denial, the British are not in the, you have Great Britain, then you have the United Kingdom. Great Britain acknowledges that there are English, Welsh, Irish, Scottish, and they don't deny each of them with
Sir,
his
can you
slang.
round up with your question? Can you please round this up with a question? If
The
you don't have one.
question is that for how long do we live in denial? We cannot base Nigeria on denial. The last thing I would just want to say concerning this house of faith will never work. House of faith will be a cacophony, because different. How are you going to contest? If I say I believe something and the other man says he doesn't believe, many faiths are mutually contradictory. So let us really, take some time to. I don't know how Pastor Reverend Ladi is going to respond to that, but we know each other very, very well.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Over to you, sir, and then I'll take the last comments in the chat. I know time is up. I really apologize. It's been a very engaging session. So if you could address that, then I'll read the last set, and then you can add your closing remarks to that. Thank you, sir.
Okay, quickly, let me take the last one first. Now, first of all, we need to know that there's a big difference between all men being created equal and all men being born equal. There's only one country in the world right now, as it were, that's taking advantage of the fact that all men are created equal. And they have been able to unleash potentials based on the fact that all men are created equal. Now, most nations take advantage of the fact that all men are not born equal. So you find out that the nation that accepts that all men are created equal, and whether we like it or not, every human being is like a program. The way you drink water, the way you assimilate it into your system, the way you breathe, what you breathe, and all that, they are all standards. Somebody programmed them like that. So we're all created equal in that sense. So we found out that the management of diversities actually works much better when you lay a value, the values that accrue to all men that are created equal. Then you'll find out that you don't need to rescue children or rescue women and all that and all that. You build a harmonious, honestly, whether we like it or not, one of the good things about the American progression is the way it's been able to absorb. I mean, I came into LA a while back and I saw that, look at people from all walks of life, different shades, colors, eyes, everybody living together. It's a miracle of some sort. So if we granulate properly, we will get it right. Secondly, even when you talk about the house of faith, the house of faith is laid on certain premises, and there are certain instructions on which there is no single faith that will come and openly tell you, even if it does, that will openly tell you that, oh, evil is good. So there are certain things, and don't forget, it's checks and balances in the pentagonal arrangement that will make it much more stable than ever before. Now, let's go back to the anointing oil and issues like that. Let's not get into the particularities of religious, the Isheshe and all that. What we needed to do, and this is what I discussed with Governor Arebeshola in those days when we were consulting in the state, is that please level the playing field. Level the playing field for all faiths and let each God defend himself. You find that was what Gideon, that's what happened in Gideon's time when he went and destroyed the shrine. And people wanted to come and hit at him. And I said, wait, let the God that's annoyed, let him come and do whatever it is that he can do. Funnily, Obafemi Awolowo's father apparently was an ardent believer who went and destroyed the Shokono shrine. I think certain complications rose later on, and that could shake anybody's faith. But thank God for Dr. Bayo Shakmara, who later came back from England, joined the cult, only to find out that the Shokono cult in Africa, in Nigeria, had learned how to culture the smallpox virus. or whatever it was. And they knew how to go and smear people's clothes and all that. And they knew how to take thorns and inject themselves. So anybody in the court was sort of immune to the pox while the pox was raging. So we need to be, the human mind is something that we must not play with. We need to sit down and realize that the key to every nation is how we handle the minds of the individuals. Now, the middle question was what again? Let me try and remember what the middle one was, because I think we dealt with the issue of diverse faiths, managing diverse faiths in the country. Can you remind me the middle one? Hello?
Did you say the last question?
No, the middle one from there were three questions.
How can we escape from our retired generals?
Yes,
control
delightful.
of our minerals.
Thank you very, 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 very much. Now, you see, this is the beautiful thing about effective communication. All leaders are very good and are effective communicators. And I'm going to tell you the advantage we have in Africa, as opposed to these things, what we need to protect moving forward. If we build a society, for instance, if you grew up in the Southwest in those days under the Omoluabi arrangement, you found out that drug abuse was kept to a minimum because parents and the community programmed the minds of young people to avoid drug abuse. I remember we were having a meeting somewhere, I think it was in the West, with some Americans, and we're comparing it to the policing. The American emphasis was on policing, stopping the drug from entering the country, running after those who are chasing it. Listen, the best way to handle that thing, we were pointing to them, was that if you cripple the demand, and you can cripple the demand or at least bring it to a minimum, that has been proven. That's why I made a presentation in the American Congress on the Omoluabi. They were looking for alternative dispute resolution and solutions to terrorism. And I was pointing out how that in that little package called the Omoluabi package, which was well thought out, and I want us to learn something here, that the Odudua, who's supposed to be the patriarch of, quote, the Yorubas, was actually not, he came in from North Africa, from all accounts, all credible accounts. So what he did was to make the people of the Southwest custodians of a matrix. Now, in that matrix, he showed that, look, there are certain things you can put into governance that will reduce policing. I can remember the white man that came in and began to ask, when they looked around in the Asian communities, that why is there no police station? Where are the police? And the community explained that in the Omoluabi arrangement in ancient times, if there was an invasion or there was a thief or something, an alarm will sound and a certain group, age grade, would immediately gather together to resolve the issue. And once it's resolved, they disappear back into the community again. So apart from the king's palace, there was no need for any jail, as it were. Why? The Omoluabi ethos is like having everybody have degrees in conflict resolution and all that. I mean, when we properly package it properly. Now, don't forget that the Virginians, when the Virginians played that role in America, they played the role of introducing that self-balancing, self-auto-correcting form of governance to build on the American Declaration of Independence. From the first 5 presidents of America, 4 came from Virginia, and nobody was going to argue, because everybody was going to get blessed and everybody was going to be, improved by it. And that's human nature for you. And there's no reason why the same thing can't happen to us here. The reason why generals are doing all this, listen, without complicity on the inside, if you have a community where the people themselves are getting dividends of the Californium that's going in their soil, the people will defend it with their lives. They won't. Somebody was talking recently about what the quote revolution that's going on in what's that country right now. I hope it doesn't run out of steam. And I'll tell you why it probably will run out of steam. Ibrahim Traore. Oh, he's the darling of every African right now, and we are all very happy for him. But there's a proverb that says, when a child falls down, he looks forward. An elder falls, we look backwards. Africa has never had a shortage of charismatic leadership. No. What Africa has never really had is programmers. Leaders who can write a program that will continue to live long after they are gone. And that's why the model of leadership in Africa, practically all through the years, they've been candles in the wind. I was saying the same thing too. I was in Rwanda for a few meetings some years back, and I pointed out, look, Magufuli was something else excellent. What's his name in Rwanda too? He's excellent. But I kept looking, I'm saying, I don't see any programs here. I don't see programs. What I'm seeing is charismatic leadership. And charismatic leadership can only take you so far. A charismatic leader needs to be able to establish a program. Now, the program that was left behind in the Southwest was actually taking apart. Apparently, Obafemi Awolowo had a conversation with, what's that tall, big fellow, Governor General, who hated him with a passion, who promised him that he was going to go to jail. Awolowo said to him, he said, we've done in education in 10 years what you couldn't do for us in 100 years. And the guy promised him that he would go to jail. James Robertson, I think. Anyway, once they noticed what had happened in the Western region, these people are thinking. They simply went back to the drawing board and came back with things to do what? To completely destroy the program that was being passed from in Awolowo's time. And because we didn't understand programming that well at that time, it was easy. Thank God for the younger generation today. Talk about programming. The digital natives, they're very much at home with programming. They know the power of a program. They know that a program will continue to give out what it is expected to produce until an override is introduced. They know that the programmer may die, but his program will keep working. They know that whatever the programmer writes as the limits of a program is the limits to which it will get. These things have practical application. And they have said to us, in closing, let me say this again, they say that we're emotive, they say we're intuitive, they say we're scientific, and they claim that we are incapable of critical thought. Success and failure are constructs. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to read these last two comments and just plug in my own question at the end. I'm asking Pastor Ladi to answer this question. How can the few entities come together to defeat the lobbying against international government from taking action against about genocide happening in Nigeria? Nigeria is grossly divided along ethnic and religious lines. Is it not the church? Is it not the church to start a narrative based on values? And then the last comment here, I'm going to keep it very short. To succeed, there must be collaboration with leadership in order to influence leadership decisions and choices of leadership representation. People like those on this platform need to invest in politicians. For example, the way the Jews have succeeded in influencing policies in America. They have delivered, this person said they have delivered in their constituency better than most in history, yet Khan leader worked against them because the Khan leader was being bankrolled by their opponent who had a history of unethical behavior and financial misappropriation. Let us identify people with integrity and support them into leadership. Without mass integration into leadership, we are only just talking. For change to happen, we must change the mindset of not getting involved in politics, as politics is dirty. Politics doesn't have to be dirty. So those are comments from two people. And then my question that I want to plug in, back in 2021, I believe October, we had the opportunity to be part of this, The Will to See, that was written by a French journalist, Bernard Henry Levy. I don't know if you know the gentleman that wrote this book, The Will to See. And the parallel he drew between what was happening in Afghanistan and some other areas that where terrorist activities were really amplified was very much Nigerian. And he was in Washington spreading this gospel of the will to see. He was in the trenches in the north, interviewing, getting names, and I saw names of Nigerians that were slaughtered. And this is a French journalist that took it upon himself to try to amplify this voice for the global community to take notice. So I wanted to add, what are we as a nation? How are we speaking out for this will to see, for the world to really pay attention to what is going on in Nigeria. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, first of all, I want us to realize that we're running a marathon race, not a 100-meter dash. And secondly, it's not a race that we're going to conclude in our lifetime. It's a race that we need to prepare for the generations to come properly. Let me quickly look at the first question by telling you a truth. There are people on this platform who are my partners. When we found out that Boko Haram was confusing the Nigerian government, we saw that things were not going well. Nobody was paying attention properly. And when we found out that, look, this thing is not going to get any traction, there are some of them on this platform, we got together to think, began to call our friends all over the world. And one of the solutions that came to us then was that we realized that if we could get the FTO designation on the Boko Haram, it would at least slow down the killings in a major way. Now, I can't get into the details of how that happened, but we had to host, first of all, a congressional visit from the US Congress, which we did. And if I tell you the intricacies involved in that visit, you wouldn't want to believe it. Because we had to get them to go to the places to see for themselves, which we knew that certain agencies would never allow them to do that. But working from Washington, we were able to get them to go to those places. Now, they called a hearing, a political hearing. Now, a while back, I was talking with some church leaders, and I was telling them 15 years, 20 years ago, we needed to set a lobby, well, we needed to put up some apparatus that will help to mold opinion and shape policy in places where it mattered. So we finally were able to get a political hearing in 2012. I think all Nigerians should pray for a man called Frank Wolf every time they pray, at least every Christian. All Nigerians should be praying for Chris Smith, Congressman Chris Smith. I can't go on with Louis Gomat. I can't go on with all their names. But there are great hearts all over the world who, based on the effort of some, and somehow we went through the process, and a political hearing on Nigeria was called. Now, let me now shock you how these things work, and to encourage us that, look, let's take the steps. We'll get there. One day, we will. I remember that when we got into Washington, we had that meeting, drafted the speech, just a 5-minute speech. A statesman, they don't really entertain religious leaders at political meetings. What they do is statesmen. So we had a statesman who was also a church leader. And his speech had to be seasoned, had to be well-balanced, and he got it right. He delivered it very well. And at the end of all proceedings, I remember then that Hillary Clinton, who had been working against our interests in Nigeria at that time, and must tell you this, because there's a lot of sponsorship going on for the Boko Haram that were tracing to the US funding. And they were complaining to me, it was my desk that was entertaining all those complaints from Northern Nigeria then. Now, 20 professors were employed to write a position against what we went to go and submit in Washington. The argument started. Immediately we left. Hillary flew to Nigeria to talk to the Nigerian president, to write a letter to the American president and to the Congress to neutralize all the work. All what we're asking for, 3 things. The first was the FTO designation, Foreign Terrorist Organization designation on the Boko Haram. I remember this, that while that was going on, we could easily have lost out. What happened that really helped Nigeria was the fact that an American, Chris Stevens, I think, an American ambassador, was killed in Benghazi. And the truth is this, it was US sponsorship, more or less. That was there. There's a film on it that you should see, but the nuances you need to be able to read in between to realize that when Hillary was stopped from being the Secretary of State, that incident in particular, I mean, I admire Hillary Clinton on a good day, but as a Nigerian, I cannot admire her work and what her tenure did to us as a country in terms of encouraging those who are going to take our country apart and then taking our president for a ride. Now, these are truths that nobody, that's why you find out, even the elections in America, they kept calling her Crooked Hillary. Where are the files? Where are the files? These are the files that she had to erase. So the truth being told, we went in there and finally the FTO, other people have been clamoring and all that. But after the political hearing, and after a lot of lobbying of friends here, there, and then, these are things that actually is either the government or the church that should be doing it. But when you see the number of people who are being killed, and there are many great hearts amongst the people who are here and the leaders in Nigeria there, we all have to gather together to do these things. So imagine when we now get properly organized to go. Now, these are not the kind of things that you want to do, and then we say there's a budget, and somebody say, "Oh, I'd like to be part of it. What do you want to use it for?" You tell them they'll blow it before time they've destroyed the operation before it started. So we've had to work with wisdom and stuff through the years to get all those things working in place. So I'm saying to that person that, look, let's just get started. Let's remember we have to be intentional. We have to be deliberate. I personally will not get involved in any unintelligent thing from anywhere. I mean, we're in our 60s now, going on to 70. What do we want to explain we're doing with our lives if we keep running around like headless chickens? So there are leaders on this platform. I'm not a leader, as in leader like that. I like to be an advisor, which is what I stick to doing. But I believe that there are consensus molders, there are builders, there are leaders here who can handle the rest of Nigerian leadership and help us to build consensus. Then let me say this quickly. Non-violent communication, I still insist, is an algorithm. Whether it's this present president or another one or anyone afterwards, we have to be able to do something. And I'm going to shut it down on this to answer your last question. There's a revelation that the church has to walk into if we really want to make a difference. If you're going to read Dr. King a lot, you'll find out that he never really made much progress until he got that revelation. Now, that revelation is one of the most hated portions of scripture in Nigeria. It's from Matthew 5. Bless them that curse you. Love your enemies. Bless them that curse you. Pray for those who despitefully use you. Now, it has been found out that the cross, the preaching of the cross to people who perish, is foolishness. But to those who are saved, that's where the power is. It doesn't make sense, but it works. Now, that is one revelation that the Nigerian church continues to deny, the preaching of the cross. Now, between Good Friday and Easter Monday, whether we like it or not, it's not only Jesus that carries the cross. The instruction in scripture is that you must carry your cross daily, even as a minister of the gospel. And when you carry your cross daily, it means you become a living sacrifice, which is much more painful than being a suicide bomber, because it becomes a daily experience for you to die that Christ may live through you. Now, when the church leadership gets to that, honestly, the mind of Christ will kick in, and there's a lot more solution. A lot of what I do is based on the fact that by his mercies, he gave me a revelation of the mind of Christ and the revelation of the cross. So, if you tell Abraham, did you tell your wife before you took out your son to Mount Moriah, wherever it was, to have an appointment with God, what you were meant to sacrifice your son? If he had told his wife, I know that marriage counseling says, hey, you must all share and blah, blah, blah. But when it comes to God and the preaching of the cross, God comes first before anything else. So what am I trying to point out here? Once we get that revelation in Nigeria, the preaching of the cross, Ajayi Crowther's generation, they had it, even if they didn't have the Greek and the Hebrew. So the selflessness that we need in leadership is, look, most of the work we've done, we don't even take any credit for it. You know why I'm very confident? Because there's a God in heaven who's watching over us, watching over his own. And he knows where to give credit at the end of the day. So what do we care? If temporal people keep wanting credit, give it to them. But let's get moving and get things established. Let me say just this. There's no shortage of persons that God has prepared in Nigeria. Many of them are even on this platform. And like we pointed out, there are two instructions that Jesus left behind. One was for the church. The other was for the nation. One was for the discipleship in the church, to prepare people to serve in the nation. God did not so love the church. He loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. But we think he loved the church. And if we will stick to that revelation that we are kingdom influencers, you will see that there are a lot of people today who are remanded in church because there's no preaching of the cross that will mature them to change from Simon into Peter, from Saul into Paul. Simon cannot do what Peter is meant to do. Saul will never be able to deliver on what Paul, the apostle, has to deliver. So the church will not be useful. I can tell you, we look down the prophetic line. There's a particular church that God raised ahead of time for the salvation of Nigeria. But that church turned inwards on itself. And when the church expanded and had the kind of global clout that was needed to move the kingdom of God forward, the church tried to move itself forward, and it became counterproductive. And honestly, you imagine what it costs the kingdom of God to groom a church from generation to generation that would be in a position to become the game changer when the nation needs it most. That church would quietly have led a coalition of both Muslims, Christians, animists, everybody, knowing full well that God respects freedom of choice. That church would have led the country quietly into the greater pastures that God had prepared for Nigeria. But because the church turned inwards and wanted its own identity to be higher than that of the kingdom identity, that's why we have a lot of confusion. Salt is an influencer. Light is an influencer. When darkness has no fear for light, there's nothing a nation can do. When salt cannot challenge. You see the beauty of us talking here. We have meetings with politicians and others and all that. When I meet with believers, we expect us to be living sacrifices. One, living sacrifices have no fear of death. Some people ask me, say, why did you work in this? Well, they put a fast one. Honestly, I'm laughing. He said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. That you may be bold to say it. The Lord is your helper, of whom shall you be afraid? Are we not the circumcision who worship God in the spirit? Don't we rejoice in Christ Jesus? Do we need to have any confidence in the flesh? Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Please go ahead. I mean, sorry, I know we can't start preaching here, but thank you. This has just been such an insightful conversation. But I think you've started the next series of reprogramming. And I know I'm going to hand over to Mr. President now, but this is an appeal. We need to have this series of reprogramming with you. We need to come up with this plan of what we are going to do to kind of reorientate or change the narrative that we've been operating under. This has just been a very insightful conversation. So thank you. I'm going to take some announcements, and just that we meet here every Thursday, 5 p.m., same Zoom link. And also to let people know that we have the School of Leadership and Governance, and that we're calling on everyone. Faye, if you could just project the flyer. And at the beginning, we played a couple of the testimonies from some of the students. And what we do at the School of Leadership is basically take them through their responsibility as citizens to be engaged, their civic responsibility and awareness. And it's like a 12-module series, and it has been incredible, the testimonies that have come from the students that have participated in that. We're inviting you to their graduation on Faye, please project that flyer. Their graduation is this weekend. This is our third cohort, and we invite everyone to please participate in these programs that we launch out as part of really engaging Nigerians and getting involved in rebuilding our nation. Thank you very much, sir. Really appreciate your time here. Over to you, Mr. President.
No, I'm not sure if I is in a position to project that flyer right now. I just wanted to interject that. Is there any other announcement that you want to make before I conclude?
You are muted, Auntie J.
I've taken the announcement, sir. Go ahead.
All right. I just want to thank my brother and my friend, Reverend Ladi Thompson, first of all, for availing himself and lending himself for the opportunity to deepen what God gifted him with and doing all this research that he has done. Not very many people have bothered to really do such an in-depth research into our situation in Nigeria. Then secondly, for all the work that he has done over the years in trying to really build Nigeria and put Nigeria together, and the conversations that he's had. And then finally, for being here. I think tonight we have unlocked quite a few things, and we have realized quite a few things. And I think, like you said, Jumoke, we must now start a series on reprogramming not just Nigeria, but reprogramming the African. Different people like Marcus Garvey, people like Bob Marley, even our dear fella Nicola Kokuti have scratched on it here and there with their own different prophetic insights, but nobody's been able to quite put it together as we're trying to put it together so that we can have an African response to the European narrative, and with that free ourselves from their clutches and from their deliberate attempts to continue to impoverize us and take our resources and make us feel less than we are. And like he says, the basis of it also is ironically unity. Everybody coming together to realize that we have a common enemy and we're not our own enemies. We have a common enemy of a group of people who came, colonized us, ruled us against our own desires, took away our resources, and put in a program to make us feel permanently dependent on them, using their agents like the World Bank, the IMF, some aspects of religion even, different kinds of rules and diplomatic this and that, just to continue to control largely the resources of this world. So we must come together as Africans and have a response. And if we can do that, you'll be shocked that they will all retrieve and the world economy will change. They will be shocked. They will also pull back because it's like unmasking a masquerade or standing up to the local bully and telling him that, look, you know what? I am David, you are Goliath. I have just one stone, but that stone is more than enough. And that really is what we want to do on the ALG. If we can actually achieve this and get some of our people to begin to think and talk differently, we would have a different Africa. Instead of investing in convoys of cars, investing in luxury vehicles, investing in overseas travel, investing in all the shadows that pass away, let them invest in creating the world that God intended. My brother, I thank you very, very much. The Lord will bless you and enlarge your coast and make you a blessing. I want to thank everybody that has been on the platform. I want to thank all those who contributed and asked questions. I think God has actually started something very fundamental here. And I think at ALG, we're going to try and run with it. God bless you all. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Have a wonderful weekend. And may Africa truly be great again. In Jesus' name. Thank you very much.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Pastor.
you. Bye, everyone.
Amen. Thank you all. Thank you so much, Pastor Ladi.
Thank you
Bye,
very much.
everyone.
Thank
Yeah, have a good night.
Good
Thank
night,
you,
everyone.
everyone. Thank you for
Thank
organizing
you,
this.
everyone. Thank you,
Thank you.
Pastor.
Also, I greet my friend,
Thank you.
Chimeji Urupamu Agari.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you
Thank
here
you
today.
so much.
Thank you,
Reverend
everyone.
Ladi.
Such
Thank
a
you,
timely
Pastor Iswa.
conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor.
God bless you.
Have a good night. God bless you.